Story 1. Overheard my husband and Mill planning to give one of our twins to my infertile sister-in-law as a birthday gift. So I ghosted him, filed for divorce, and moved to a different city to protect my babies. I, 28F, and my husband, Mike, 30M, have been in a loving relationship for almost 6 years. We met when I first joined my job, and because he was more experienced than me, he would help me out immensely from the very beginning. Mike knew that I didn't come from a good family. I had to fight for what I wanted and do odd jobs here and there to save up money for myself. Both my parents were into drugs and hardly did anything for me. Hence, when I went to college, I moved out, cut them off, and never looked back. They would sometimes try to get in touch with me if they needed any money, and because of that, I had changed my number and address several times. When I started working with Mike, he was exceptionally kind and sweet to me. I remember once I had worn a shirt to my office which apparently had 2 small holes that I didn't notice, but Mike noticed them and bought me a new shirt to change into so that our coworkers would not find out. When it rained or snowed, he would pick me up from my place, even though my place was more than 1 hour away from his, because he knew I had to walk a lot to get the bus. I would sometimes skip lunch, not just because I wanted to save money, but also, while growing up, I never had enough to eat 3 proper meals a day, so it had become kind of a habit as an adult. However, Mike would always bring me lunch and insist on eating with me to make sure that I was properly fed. Like I said, my husband was sweet to me, and it didn't take long for me to fall in love with him. The only thorn in our relationship was his family. For some context, Mike comes from an exceptionally wealthy family, the sort of family where you have multiple cars, a vacation home, and you go for cruise vacations during the summer. He and his sister went to private school and never had to worry about paying anything themselves. In fact, his dad has told him several times as to why he was even doing a job, because the kind of money they have can set him up for life. But Mike insists that he likes his job and wants to live life with a purpose. Anyways, when Mike introduced me to his family, he had told me that they can be cold and unwelcoming, but they would eventually warm up to me. I went to meet them for the first time, keeping this in mind. I wore my best dress and heels and made sure to present myself in the most polite and respectful manner possible. His father greeted me politely, while his mother didn't even bother shaking my hand. His sister, Kayla, looked me up and down and smirked as if I looked like a clown. I felt so humiliated, but I thought of what Mike had told me and let it slide. Throughout the evening, I tried my best to engage in conversation and to show genuine interest in their lives and interests. I complimented his mother's cooking and praised his father's choice of decor and his collected art pieces. However, every time I said something good about his art, his mother would scoff and comment something like, "As if someone like you would know anything about art." Now, I did grow up poor, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't interested in art, so her comments seriously hurt me. Mike would squeeze my hand every once in a while, pleading with me to keep my cool. When it came time for dinner, his mother insisted that I should be seated away from Mike since she and Kayla wanted to be near him. I sat next to Phil, and he was quite open-minded and polite, so we had a good conversation throughout the evening. Kayla and Mill were fawning over Mike and completely ignoring me. The 3 of them were busy having conversations with each other. At one point, Kayla knowingly started talking about one of Mike's exes, whom she was still friends with. She said how the ex is apparently looking the best that she has ever looked and started showing Mike pictures of that girl in bikinis from their recent trip. Mike told his sister to stop, but Kayla laughed at his discomfort and told him that he could always slide into the ex's DMs if he wanted to, because apparently she still has a soft corner for him. I was growing increasingly uncomfortable, and I guess Phil noticed that too, so he asked Kayla to stop talking as well. However, his efforts were met with resistance from Mike's mother, who seemed to take offense at his interference. I was so uncomfortable with their whole family dynamics that when Mike excused himself from the table and asked me to come with him so he could show me his childhood room, I was grateful to escape the awkward situation. I followed Mike out of the dining room and up the stairs to his childhood sanctuary. Later, in his room, Mike apologized to me about his sister. He told me that she had always been this way even when they were growing up and would always push him to date one of her friends, telling him how he should marry someone only she was comfortable with. I could sense that he was genuinely apologetic, so I let it go and informed him it was best that we left. He agreed. It wasn't until later, as we were saying our goodbyes, that Mike's father pulled me aside. His expression softened, and he added that he had been skeptical of me at first, but my sincerity and efforts to connect had won him over. He apologized for his initial coldness and assured me that I was welcome in their home anytime. He told me to not take Mill and Kayla's words to heart, and that he was happy Mike had found someone like me. I felt relieved after hearing those words. Ever since then, I knew that it would take a lot of effort for me to impress Mill and Kayla if I ever wanted to be accepted by them. However, the situation never changed as Mike's and my relationship progressed. His mother and sister would continuously dissuade him from dating me. I remember once, for my birthday, Mike and I were supposed to go on a long drive to the beach where we would be having a romantic picnic. I was really excited to spend the day with him. However, in the morning, his sister called him, telling him how she needed to see him urgently since something had happened to her. He let me know, and I immediately asked him to go and visit her because we really believed her. However, it turns out she had just called him as a prank, and there was, in fact, nothing urgent. She insisted on him staying for the day, and when he refused, telling her that it was my birthday and he wanted to spend the day with me, she left and told him that it was exactly why she had called him, so he had an excuse to not spend the day with me. Mike was so pissed at her that he stopped talking to her for months after that. His sister would then angrily send me texts, calling me various names and telling me that she wanted to kill me because I was coming in between her and her brother. I would, of course, show these messages to Mike, and this would make him more pissed. It was only later that year, in Christmas, after Mill intervened, that Mike agreed to forgive Kayla. However, she never once apologized to me for all the harassment. When Kayla got married young to her then-boyfriend, Joe, she refused to invite me to her wedding, telling Mike how he could instead come to her event single and meet some of her friends. Mike refused to go without me, so in the end, she had no choice but to include me in the guest list for her wedding. I wore a long pink floor-length dress that Mike and I had picked out for me since this was a grand event and we were all supposed to dress well. He did tell me how incredibly beautiful I looked, and during Kayla's event, several other guests, including Phil, complimented me as well. Kayla later confronted me about how I had ruined her wedding by upstaging her, even though other guests also wore floor-length dresses. She yelled at me and Mike that I had knowingly dressed that way to get all the male attention. Mike tried to pacify her, telling her how that was not our intention, but Kayla refused to listen. She got even nastier to me after that incident. Over the years, Mill and Kayla have insulted my appearance, telling me that I look poor, calling me a fat pig when I gained a couple of pounds, making fun of me and my family background in front of their family, friends, and overall have never changed their distaste for me, no matter how much I have tried to stay polite. Hence, during the 4th year of my relationship with Mike, I stopped trying altogether, as their behavior was starting to affect my self-confidence, and there were only so many shots I could take about my appearance. I had a long conversation with Mike and put my foot down. I stopped going with Mike for his family dinners or family events and never responded to Kayla and Mill's messages anymore. I ignored them just the way they had ignored me over the years, and my mental health significantly improved. Mike understood and supported my decision, even though Mill told him that I was being disrespectful for not visiting them anymore and that I was not worthy enough to get married to. However, despite what his family thought, last year Mike proposed to me. The proposal was a moment of pure joy and love. He had prepared everything for the day and was so nervous when he popped the question. I had no doubt in my mind when I told him yes. Later, when he told his family about it, his father congratulated us, while his mother simply told him that she hoped he had given this a lot of thought, otherwise he was going to regret it. Mike asked her to not be rude since she was on speaker, and then she begrudgingly congratulated me also. I guess she finally accepted that she had no choice and that I would be a part of her son's life moving forward. When Kayla found out, she had a much more strong reaction. She apparently told Mike that he needed to get a prenup with me, telling him how poor people like me can suck the money out of anyone. That was not only offensive, but it shocked Mike as well about how low his sister thought about me. He told her firmly that if she didn't like the fact that he was getting married to me, then she was welcome to not attend. Kayla and he fought a bit more, and Kayla even called me a bloodthirsty gold digger. However, 2 days later, she sent me a text message apologizing to me for everything, and I thought maybe she and Mill had talked and understood that there was nothing that she could say or do at this point to keep her brother away from me. I did tell Mike that I would be open to signing a prenup before our marriage because I wasn't marrying him for the money. I was marrying him because he was kind and supportive of me, and that is all that I have wanted in my life. I had a good job and I was happy with what I had, so I didn't need anything more from him. Mike assured me that he knew my heart and he was never going to ask me to sign a prenup. As the wedding was approaching, I wanted to look my best, so I started to work out rigorously. I would sometimes post after gym selfies on my social media, and they were perfectly appropriate pictures. I never posted any racy pictures. However, one weekend Mike came back home after his family dinner and told me how Kayla and his mom had told him that I must be cheating on him since I was knowingly posting all these pictures to get attention from other men. He went on to say how he stood up for me and told them that he didn't mind the pictures, but Kayla told him that this is how women start to cheat on their partners, which then made him think. He asked me up front if I was cheating on him, and I was taken aback by his question. I firmly told him no, and how I was even offended that he would ask me such a question. He started to apologize to me and told me how his sister and mother got into his head, and he never would have questioned me otherwise. To give some context, my account is private, and I have more female followers in my account than male, so to this day I have no idea why Mill and Kayla would even say something like that to Mike. During the wedding, Mill and Kayla did everything that they could to cause even more issues. Kayla kept saying how she wanted to be a bridesmaid, but I refused point blank. So then Mill called me and chastised me for not including Kayla and how bad it would look to the family. I pointed out to her that Kayla never included me in her wedding party either, but she told me that Kayla is going to be my sister-in-law, so I have to include her, otherwise she would not be paying for our wedding. This led to a huge fight. When I told Mike everything, he talked with Phil, who assured us that it was his money and Mill had no say in our wedding whatsoever. I can only imagine Mill's face and how she must have felt when she would have learned that her attempt to manipulate our wedding plans had failed. Our wedding happened after this without any more incidents or interference by Kayla and Mill. Mike and I are still going strong, and I thought everything was good between us. However, something has happened recently that has made me question everything. I never thought I would find myself in this situation. It all started when I found out 3 months ago that I was pregnant with twins. Mike was as pleasantly surprised as me. We were both filled with excitement and happiness. We had been trying for a baby ever since we got married, and the news of not just one but 2 little ones on the way felt like a dream come true. Mike insisted on having a family get-together where he would announce my pregnancy, even though I wanted something low-key. I understood his excitement of becoming a father, so I agreed. When Mike and I announced I was pregnant during the party, everyone immediately came over to hug us and congratulate us. However, Kayla and Mill looked pissed and stared daggers at me. For context, Kayla got married before us, so she has been trying to get pregnant for a long time. However, I have heard from Mike that she is infertile and basically barren. She and her husband, Joe, have tried everything but to no success. Mike, Joe, and Phil have tried to convince Kayla to adopt if she wants children so much, but Kayla refuses to listen. She says she doesn't want to raise a kid from the streets, so I guess she wasn't happy when she found out that I had gotten pregnant. I was aware of Kayla's personal issue, and it was also one of the reasons why I didn't want to make the announcement in front of everyone, because regardless of my equation with her, I did sympathize as a woman for her condition. When Mike's relatives started to ask about the baby shower, and if we knew the baby's gender and such, Kayla burst out crying in front of everyone. She rushed into the washroom and locked herself there. As you can imagine, everyone's mood immediately soured. Mike and Mill begged her to open the door, but Kayla refused. After 30 minutes of them begging, Kayla came out with red, puffy eyes. She looked at me directly and told me that I should have talked to her first before making the announcement since she couldn't have a child of her own. I tried explaining to her that I never intended to make her feel bad, but she ignored me and walked out of the party with Joe. Mill later chastised me about how selfish I am and how I always make everything about me without caring about other people's feelings. After the party, Mike did apologize to me and assured me that he would talk to Mill and Kayla and make sure that they would know that this was all his idea and he never thought that our announcement would hurt his sister so much. I still felt bad about Kayla, but my husband assured me that it wasn't my fault at all. The next weekend, when he went to his parents' place for dinner, I stayed behind as usual since I wanted nothing to do with his family conversations. I have no idea what they talked about, But Mike came back home telling me how he had ended up apologizing to Kayla since she was really hurt about everything. He recounted how Kayla had shared the emotional toll of her struggles, detailing the countless medical tests and sleepless nights spent in tears for years. As he spoke, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Despite the tensions between us, Kayla was still family, and the thought of her suffering weighed heavily on my conscience. I realized that beneath the facade of resentment and animosity, there was a woman who was hurting and in need of compassion. Mike told me how I should reach out to her, and I agreed. I messaged Kayla and apologized to her for not giving her a heads up about my pregnancy before the party. I told her that I wanted to resolve things between us before my twins were born so that we could start fresh as a family. To my surprise, Kayla responded with unexpected warmth and understanding. She thanked me for reaching out and acknowledged her own role in the strained relationship between us. She expressed her genuine happiness for my pregnancy and reassured me that she wanted nothing more than to mend our relationship and be supportive during this special time. Kayla offered to throw a baby shower for me when the time came, telling me how she has never had a chance to do it for anyone, so she would love to organize one for me. I graciously agreed. In the months leading up to the baby shower, I noticed that both Kayla and my mother-in-law were unusually kind and sweet to me. They would regularly call me, asking about my health and send me flowers with cards that said, "Hope mom-to-be is feeling okay," or "Can't wait to see the twins." It was definitely surprising and a bit unsettling because, up until that point, our relationship had been strained to say the least. Suddenly, both Kayla and my mother-in-law were acting completely out of character, showering me with love. It felt like a sudden shift, and I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that accompanied it. However, I thought maybe they were making an effort to mend things between us before the twins were born. I never imagined there could be anything sinister behind it. Despite my suspicions, I tried to remain optimistic and hope that maybe we were turning a new leaf as a family. Mike continued to visit his family for dinner every weekend, and everything seemed fine on the surface. On the day of my baby shower, I was surprised to see that Kayla had actually listened to all my suggestions and kept them in mind while organizing the event. The event was everything I had hoped for and more, with friends and family gathered to celebrate the imminent arrival of our twins. Unlike typical baby showers, the men of the family were invited to the event also. Phil had brought multiple gifts for the twins. We were all having a lot of fun and playing baby shower games throughout the afternoon. Kayla was polite while engaging with the guests and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. During the middle of one of our games, I had to excuse myself to go to the washroom. After I finished my deed, I was just coming out of the washroom when I heard my husband and Mill furiously arguing in the hallway in hushed tones. Curiosity piqued. I paused for a moment, straining to hear their words. They didn't know I was listening. At first, I thought it was just innocent chatter, maybe about baby names or nursery decor, but as I listened closer, my heart sank. Mill was asking my husband if he had a conversation with me yet regarding their plan with the twins. Mike told her to lower her voice since someone could hear them, but Mill told him that the time was coming near and he needed to man up and talk to me. Mike told her that he was working on it and that it wasn't an easy conversation to have. Mill then told him that he needed to have this discussion before the twins were born. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to give one of the twins to Kayla on time for her 27th birthday. She told him how he had already agreed to Kayla's demands and had no way out since she had been looking forward to getting a child for months now. My eyes widened in shock as I processed these snippets of conversation I had overheard. My heart raced with a mix of disbelief and growing dread as the gravity of their discussion sank in. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They were discussing giving one of our twins away to my sister-in-law as a birthday gift. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a punch to the gut. I stood there frozen as they continued to talk about their plans as if it were the most normal thing in the world. My mind raced with a million thoughts and emotions. Anger, hurt, sadness, but most of all, betrayal. I had thought my husband, Mill, and Kayla were happy about our pregnancy, about our twins, but now I have realized that their happiness wasn't because of our growing family. It was because of their twisted plan to give away one of our babies. At that moment, I felt like I didn't even know my husband anymore. How could he betray me like this? How could he even consider giving away our child? Our babies were not gifts to be given away. They were our children, our flesh and blood. I waited patiently for them to finish their conversation, as I didn't want to be caught, and then I slowly walked out of the washroom. I was shaking in fear and anger. However, I held it together as best as I could in front of others. Since the baby shower, I've been racking my head to come up with a plan, so I can escape this situation as fast as I can. I can't endanger my twins in the future. This family is crazy, and I can't even trust my husband anymore. I want to scream at him every time I see him, but I am trying to pretend that all is well, so I can work on my escape plan. However, because of my pregnancy hormones, I am a bit worried that I will be judged for leaving my husband without even asking for an explanation. I don't mind being a single mother, but should I give the father of my children a chance to explain himself before tearing apart the family? Update 1. Thank you everyone for your advice and suggestions. I read through all the comments, and I have made up my mind now. I want to assure you that I will never let anyone take away my baby from me. I have reached out to my best friend of many years, and I have asked for her help. She is as shocked as me that my husband could plan such a thing with his family. She has agreed to come and help me move my things so that I can live with her while I file for divorce from my husband. Tonight is the last night I will stay in the same house as Mike, and tomorrow I will leave without a note or an explanation because he doesn't deserve one. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update. I wanted to update everyone on what has happened since my last post. As I mentioned before, I made the decision to file for divorce from Mike after overhearing his conversation with his mother about their plan regarding our twins. It was a heartbreaking decision, but I knew it was the right one for me and my babies. With the help of my best friend, I gathered all my belongings and left our house while Mike was at work. It was a difficult and emotional moment when I walked out of the doors, as I never imagined a day would come when I would leave my husband. But I know I have to prioritize the safety and well-being of myself and my unborn children. I have since filed for divorce. Even though Mike has tried to reach out to me multiple times, I haven't blocked him as I do want to be cordial to him until the divorce is done. Since Mike has no idea that I overheard him with his mother, he has sent me several text messages accusing me of betraying him and how his family was right all along. I haven't sent him a single explanation because I know no matter what I say, he and his family will try to gaslight and manipulate me, so for now they can think whatever they want. The truth will come out during the divorce proceedings. I have blocked Kayla and Mill, although I do feel a bit guilty about not answering Phil's calls. I have no idea whether he was involved in this plan or not, so I can't take any chances. I have spent the last few days just crying while my best friend has sat with me and never left my side. She has assured me that I am not a bad mother for leaving such a man and has tried to lessen my guilt since I will be a single mother from now on. I plan on going back to work as soon as I can. My best friend, who works from home, has agreed to babysit my twins when I do join the workforce. However, I have insisted on paying her for her time as babysitting twins won't be easy. I know this isn't a solid plan, and I wish I had reliable parents who could help me out in this situation, but unfortunately I don't. Also, my best friend will only help me look after the kids until I can get my divorce from Mike, so then with the child support I can hire a proper nanny. I know it won't be easy, but I am determined to create a safe and loving environment for my twins. I am grateful for the support and encouragement I have received from all of you during this challenging time. Update 3. Hello everyone. It's been 6 months since my last update. A lot of things have happened since then. First of all, I have given birth already, and now I'm the proud mother of my beautiful twins, Jackson and Vinny. I was so nervous before giving birth, but the moment I held my beautiful twins in my arms for the first time, all of my worries melted away. They are my everything, and I'm glad that I took them away from that crazy family. My divorce from Mike was finalized, and despite his pleading, he was not granted custody of the children. He did find out during the proceeding exactly why I had left him, and he was shocked that I had found out about his plan. He tried to apologize, to explain himself, telling me how he was compelled and pressured by his family every day and how he had no choice, but I was further disappointed with his cowardice. It turns out that Phil did know about everything, and although he had tried to dissuade Kayla and Mill, no one had listened to him. I am so disgusted by this family that I have felt no remorse since divorcing Mike. I didn't ask for a single penny for alimony, but he has agreed to pay a hefty amount for child support, which will be enough for me to provide the best for my children. Kayla and Mill did try to get in touch with me and even showed up during the divorce proceeding, screaming and yelling at me for taking away the twins from them. They told me how they could have provided my children with everything and that I was a bad mother for being so selfish. In the end, they had to be restrained by the guards. I am glad that they embarrassed themselves publicly because it helped me get a restraining order against them. Since the divorce, Mike has tried to remain in touch with me, pleading for a chance to talk and reconcile, but I can never trust him again around my children. With the help of my best friend and a supportive network of friends and family, I've been able to navigate the challenges of single parenthood these past few months. Recently, I have made the decision to move out of the city entirely, as I want to create a fresh start for myself and my children, far away from the toxicity and manipulation of Mike's family. I know as long as I live in the same city, they might try to get in touch with my twins, and I don't want that. With full custody of my twins, I have the freedom to build a new life wherever I choose, and I intend to make the most of that opportunity. Moving forward, I'm going to be focused on myself and my babies, so there will be no further updates. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My wife cheated while I was grieving my brother's death. Then, she blamed me for neglecting her. Years later, I run into her at a wedding, and she tries to reconcile, but I reveal the shocking truth about my new life. I, 32M, have been with my wife, Teresa, 30F, for 8 years, married for 4. We met during our sophomore year of college at a mutual friend's party. I was immediately drawn to her confident demeanor and quick wit. Teresa was studying business while I was pursuing engineering. We bonded over our shared love of outdoor activities and trying new cuisines. Our first date was a disaster. I forgot my wallet and spilled wine on her dress. But Teresa laughed it off, and we ended up having a great time walking around campus and talking for hours. From that moment, I knew she was special. As we continued dating, I was impressed by Teresa's drive and ambition. She came from a working-class background and was determined to build a successful career. I admired how she balanced her studies with a part-time job and internships. Teresa pushed me to step out of my comfort zone, encouraging me to apply for competitive internships and leadership positions in student organizations. After graduation, we both landed good jobs in the city. Teresa started at a lighting firm, while I joined an engineering company. We moved in together after a year and got engaged shortly after. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair with close friends and family. Teresa looked stunning in her simple white dress, and I remember feeling like the luckiest man alive. The first few years of our marriage were amazing. We both advanced in our careers, allowing us to travel and enjoy life in the city. We had a great group of friends and often hosted dinner parties or game nights at our place. Teresa and I communicated well and rarely fought. When we did disagree, we always made an effort to listen to each other and find a compromise. One of the things I loved most about Teresa was her independence. We both valued our personal time and hobbies. Teresa was into yoga and painting, while I enjoyed playing basketball and tinkering with old cars. We supported each other's interests and maintained a healthy balance between couple time and individual pursuits. Everything changed when my older brother, Mason, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Mason and I had always been incredibly close. He was more than just a brother. He was my best friend, my confidant, and my role model growing up. Mason always looked out for me. He taught me how to ride a bike, helped me with my homework, and gave me advice on everything from school to dating. When our parents divorced during my teenage years, Mason became my rock. He was in college at the time but would call me every day to check in. He even came home on weekends to make sure I was okay. Mason was the one who encouraged me to apply to college and helped me move into my dorm. At my wedding, his best man speech had everyone in tears, happy ones, of course. Mason's diagnosis hit me like a truck. He had always been the picture of health. He ran marathons, ate well, and never smoked. Seemed so unfair. I remember sitting in the doctor's office with him and his wife, Sarah, feeling like the world was crumbling around us. From that moment, I devoted as much time as possible to Mason. I drove him to chemo appointments, stayed with him in the hospital, and tried to keep his spirits up. Teresa was supportive at first, often coming with me to visit Mason and helping Sarah with meals and housework. But as weeks turned into months, Teresa started to complain. She said I was spending too much time with Mason and neglecting our relationship. I tried to explain how important it was for me to be there for my brother, but Teresa seemed to resent the time I was spending away from her. We started arguing more frequently, usually about my schedule or her feeling neglected. I did my best to balance time with Mason and Teresa, but it was incredibly stressful. Mason's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and I wanted to be there for him as much as possible. At the same time, I felt guilty for not giving Teresa the attention she wanted. It was a no-win situation. Despite aggressive treatment, Mason passed away 8 months after his diagnosis. I was completely devastated. Mason had been such a constant in my life, and I couldn't imagine a world without him. The loss hit me hard, and I fell into a deep depression. I took a leave of absence from work and spent most of my time at home. Some days I could barely get out of bed. Everything reminded me of Mason. TV shows we used to watch together, inside jokes we shared, even certain foods he loved. The grief was overwhelming. Teresa tried to be supportive at first, but her patience wore thin quickly. She kept trying to get me to snap out of it and resume our normal social life. She would plan outings or invite friends over, but I just couldn't bring myself to socialize. Teresa seemed to take this personally, accusing me of pushing her away. This went on for about 3 months. I know it wasn't easy for Teresa, but I was doing my best to process this huge loss. I was seeing a grief counselor and trying to work through my emotions, but healing takes time. Teresa became increasingly distant and irritable. Then, one day, I got a call from Liam, Mason's best friend since childhood. Liam had been like another brother to me growing up and had been a great support since Mason's death. But this call was different. Liam's voice was hesitant as he told me he had seen Teresa at a hotel with another man. I didn't want to believe it at first. I trusted Teresa completely and couldn't imagine her cheating. But Liam sent me a photo he had taken, and there was no denying it. The picture showed Teresa in a passionate embrace with a man I didn't recognize, clearly about to enter a hotel room. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. How could Teresa do this to me, especially while I was grieving my brother? I sat in shocked silence for hours, staring at that photo and trying to make sense of it. When Teresa got home that evening, I confronted her. I showed her the photo and asked for an explanation. At first, she tried to deny it, claiming it wasn't what it looked like. But when I pressed her, she broke down crying and admitted to having an affair with a coworker for the past 2 months. Teresa's excuses made me feel sick. She said she felt lonely and neglected while I was grieving. She complained that I wasn't meeting her needs and that she deserved to be happy. She even had the audacity to suggest that I had driven her to cheat by being emotionally unavailable. I was furious and heartbroken. I told Teresa to get out and that I wanted a divorce. She begged me to reconsider and give her another chance. She cried and pleaded, saying it was a mistake and that she still loved me. But I knew I could never trust her again after this betrayal. The next day, Teresa called and texted me nonstop, trying to explain herself. She said I was being unfair and overreacting. According to her, I had emotionally abandoned her first, by spending so much time with Mason and then withdrawing while grieving. She actually tried to blame me for pushing her to cheat. I'm at a complete loss. How could the woman I loved and trusted for 8 years do this to me, especially while I was grieving my brother? And now she's trying to turn it around on me like I'm somehow at fault. Am I crazy for refusing to even consider reconciling? I feel like my whole world has been shattered. I keep replaying our relationship in my mind, wondering if there were signs I missed. Was Teresa always this selfish, and I just didn't see it? Or did Mason's illness and death change her somehow? I'm questioning everything now. Part of me is angry at myself for not seeing this coming. Maybe if I had tried harder to balance my time between Mason and Teresa, this wouldn't have happened. But then I remind myself that a loving partner would have understood and supported me during such a difficult time. I haven't told many people about Teresa's affair yet. I'm embarrassed and don't want to deal with everyone's reactions. But I know I'll need support going forward, especially if I go through with the divorce. I'm not sure what to do next. The thought of going through a divorce while still grieving Mason is overwhelming, but I also can't imagine staying with someone who could betray me like this. Any advice would be appreciated. Edit. Thank you all for the supportive comments and advice. To clarify a few things. Teresa knew how close Mason and I were. She had met him many times and seemed to like him. She was at the hospital with me when he passed away. I never completely shut Teresa out during my grieving. We still lived together, ate meals together, etc. I just wasn't in the mood for going out or being intimate. Before confronting Teresa, I did some digging and found evidence that the affair had actually been going on for 4 months, not 2 like she claimed. So it started shortly after Mason died. Teresa and I did not have any major relationship issues before this. We had normal disagreements, but nothing serious. She never expressed feeling neglected until after Mason got sick. I appreciate everyone's input as I try to process this betrayal. I'll post an update when I have more news. Update 1. It's been about 2 months since my original post. A lot has happened, so I wanted to give an update. I filed for divorce shortly after discovering Teresa's affair. The decision wasn't easy, but I knew I could never trust her again after what she did. Teresa's reaction to the divorce filing was a mix of anger and desperate pleading. She continued to call and message me constantly, alternating between tearful apologies and accusatory rants. One day, Teresa showed up at my office unannounced. She caused a scene in the lobby, crying and begging me to give her another chance. My co-workers were uncomfortable, and I was mortified. I had to have security escort her out. After that incident, I blocked her number for my own sanity. Teresa moved out of our house and in with her parents. I've been staying in the house, but it feels empty and full of painful memories. I'm considering selling it and finding a new place, but the thought of going through another big life change right now is overwhelming. Through mutual friends, I heard that Teresa was telling everyone that I had mentally abused her by abandoning her emotionally. She claimed that I had refused to communicate or work on our marriage, leaving her no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. It was infuriating to hear these lies being spread about me. Some of our friends have taken sides in the divorce. Most have been supportive of me, but a few believe Teresa's version of events. I've lost a couple of friendships over this, which hurts on top of everything else. I'm trying to focus on the people who have stood by me. The divorce proceedings have been messy. Teresa is trying to claim that she deserves half of everything, including my inheritance from Mason. My lawyer assures me she has no legal right to it, but she's dragging out the process anyway. It feels like a slap in the face that she would try to profit from my brother's death after betraying me. I've been struggling a lot with depression and trust issues in the aftermath of all this. Some days it's hard to even get out of bed. I've lost weight because I rarely have an appetite. My performance at work has suffered, but thankfully my boss has been understanding. One positive development. I reconnected with an old friend from high school, Olivia. We bumped into each other at a coffee shop and got to talking. Olivia lost her mom to cancer a few years ago, so she really understood what I was going through with Mason. We've been hanging out as friends, and it's been nice to have someone who gets it. Olivia and I have a lot in common that I'd forgotten about. We were both on the debate team in high school and share a love of classic movies. She's been introducing me to new music and podcasts, which has been a welcome distraction. Olivia doesn't push me to talk about Teresa or the divorce, but she's there when I need to vent. Teresa found out I was spending time with Olivia and completely flipped out. She showed up at my house unannounced, screaming that I was a hypocrite for moving on so quickly while vilifying her. She accused me of having an affair with Olivia, which is absolutely not true. I had to threaten to call the police before she would leave. The whole situation has been a nightmare, but I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm focused on healing and figuring out who I am outside of my relationship with Teresa. I'm grateful for the support of my family and friends during this difficult time. I've been trying to honor Mason's memory in positive ways. I made a donation to the cancer center where he was treated and have been volunteering there when I can. Mason's wife, Sarah, and their kids have been a great source of support. We get together for dinner often, and it helps to talk about Mason with people who loved him as much as I did. There are still moments when I miss Teresa and the life we had together, but then I remind myself of her betrayal and how she's behaved since I found out. It helps reinforce that I'm making the right decision by ending the marriage. I'm not ready to think about dating again. The thought of putting myself out there and risking another heartbreak is terrifying. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and healing from everything that's happened. I'll post another update once the divorce is finalized. Thanks again to everyone who has offered kind words and advice. It really does help to know I'm not alone in this. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update. The divorce was finally finalized last week. Much to my relief. Teresa fought me every step of the way, trying to drag out the process and get more money. In the end, we split our joint assets 50-50, and she didn't get any of my inheritance from Mason. The day after the divorce was official, Teresa showed up at my office again. She was crying and begging me to reconsider, saying she had made a terrible mistake and still loved me. I calmly but firmly told her it was over and asked her to leave. She refused, causing a scene until security had to escort her out. It was humiliating, and I ended up taking the rest of the day off work. My boss called me into his office the next day. I was worried he was upset about the disruption, but he was actually very understanding. He shared that he had gone through a messy divorce years ago and offered me some time off if I needed it. I was grateful for his support and understanding. On a more positive note, things have been going well with Olivia. What started as a friendship has slowly developed into something more. We've been officially dating for about 2 months now. Olivia is kind, understanding, and patient with me as I continue to work through my trust issues. She encourages me to talk about Mason and never makes me feel bad for still grieving. Olivia and I have been taking things slow, which I appreciate. We enjoy cooking meals together, going for long walks, and binge-watching TV shows. She's been helping me rediscover old hobbies that I had neglected during my marriage, like playing guitar and photography. I've also been focusing on myself. I joined a gym, started learning guitar, and have been traveling more. It feels good to rediscover who I am as an individual. I took a solo trip to the mountains, something I'd always wanted to do, but Teresa wasn't interested in. It was refreshing to have time alone with my thoughts and nature. Teresa continues to badmouth me to anyone who will listen. She's told mutual friends that I'm cold and unfeeling, that I never really loved her, and that Olivia and I must have been having an affair before our divorce. It's frustrating, but I'm trying not to engage with her drama. I've been spending more time with Mason's family. His kids are growing up so fast, and it's bittersweet to see them reach milestones that Mason isn't here for. We've started a tradition of having Sunday dinners together, sharing stories about Mason and keeping his memory alive. Last month would have been Mason's birthday. It was a tough day, but Olivia suggested we do something to honor him. We ended up organizing a small charity run in Mason's name, with proceeds going to cancer research. It felt good to channel my grief into something positive. Overall, I'm in a much better place than I was a year ago. I still miss Mason terribly, but the pain isn't as raw. I'm cautiously optimistic about my future with Olivia, and I'm proud of myself for standing my ground and not letting Teresa manipulate me into reconciling. There are still tough days, of course. Sometimes I wake up feeling angry at Teresa for throwing away our marriage. Other times I miss the future we had planned together. But I'm learning to sit with these feelings without letting them overwhelm me. Thanks again to this community for all the support. It really helped me get through some dark times. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm feeling hopeful for the first time in a long while. Update 3. It's been about a year since my last update. Life has settled into a new normal, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this whole situation. Olivia and I are still together and going strong. We recently moved in together and adopted a dog. She's been an incredible support through everything. I still have moments of insecurity or doubt, but Olivia is always patient and reassuring. Our relationship isn't perfect. We've had our share of disagreements and challenges, but we always make an effort to communicate openly and work through issues together. It's refreshing to be with someone who values honesty and mutual respect. I ran into Teresa at a mutual friend's wedding a few months ago. It was awkward, but we managed to be civil. She apologized again for her behavior during our divorce and said she was in therapy, working on herself. I wished her well but made it clear I wasn't interested in rekindling any kind of relationship, even a friendship. Seeing Teresa brought up a mix of emotions. Part of me felt angry all over again, remembering her betrayal and the pain she caused, but I also felt a sense of closure. Talking to her, I realized how much I've grown and healed over the past couple of years. The grief over Mason comes in waves now. Some days are harder than others, especially around his birthday and the anniversary of his death. But I found healthy ways to cope and honor his memory. I volunteer at the hospital where he was treated and have gotten close with his wife and kids. Mason's oldest son, who's now 14, has been having a tough time lately. He's been acting out at school and struggling with anger issues. I've been spending more time with him, taking him to basketball games and just being there to talk. It feels good to be there for him the way Mason always was for me. Olivia and I have talked about our future together. We're not in a rush to get married, but we both see this relationship as long-term. We've discussed having kids someday, which is something I never thought I'd want after everything that happened with Teresa. It's scary to think about opening my heart like that again, but Olivia makes me feel safe. Work has been going well. I got a promotion a few months ago, which has been both exciting and challenging. The new role involves more travel, which has been an adjustment for Olivia and me, but we're figuring out how to balance our time together and our individual pursuits. I've been trying to reconnect with old hobbies and interests. I joined a local amateur baseball league, something I loved in college but gave up when life got busy. It's been fun to get back on the field and meet new people. Olivia comes to my games when she can, cheering me on from the stands. Looking back, I can see now how toxic my relationship with Teresa had become, even before the cheating. We had grown apart, but we were both too scared to admit it. While I'll never excuse her affair, I've made peace with what happened and am focused on the future. There are still moments when I wonder, what if Mason hadn't gotten sick? What if I had noticed Teresa pulling away sooner? What if I had handled things differently? But I'm learning to let go of those thoughts and focus on the present. I'm not the same person I was when I wrote that first post 2 years ago. The pain and betrayal changed me, but not all of those changes have been bad. I've learned a lot about myself, about resilience, and about what I really want in a partner and in life. To anyone going through similar circumstances, it does get better. Take time to heal, surround yourself with supportive people, and don't be afraid to start over. You deserve happiness and someone who truly values you. This will be my final update on this saga. Thank you all again for the kindness and encouragement over the past couple of years. It made a world of difference during the darkest times. I'm looking forward to the future, whatever it may bring. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My wife's paralyzed ex-husband is dying of cancer and wants her to move in with him to care for him, making me feel like a third wheel in my own marriage. My wife, 45F, was married to Bob, 46M, for almost a decade. They got divorced 12 years ago. There is a story behind it. Bob and my wife were college sweethearts. They got married very young and were happy. However, tragedy struck, and Bob got into an accident which led him to be paralyzed from the waist down. My wife was 29, and Bob was 30 back then. My wife took care of him for 3 years, but at the end, she just gave up. She told Bob that she could not do this anymore. She knows she sounds selfish, but she always wanted kids. But Bob cannot have children after the accident. She wanted to get a divorce but promised him that she would always be there for him. She just wanted to be selfish for once. Bob, although he was upset, understood. They split amicably. My wife stood by her promise and still visited Bob. She was still a part-time caretaker for him before she met me. I, 40M, met her 2 years after her divorce. While we were dating, she made her situation with Bob clear, that she would continue to see him. I know a lot of guys would be skeptical about this, but I just loved her the moment I saw her. Her kindness and compassion towards others is what drew me towards her. After we became official, she only went to see Bob once a week, sometimes even twice. I did not mind. In fact, I liked her ex very much. He didn't treat me like I was the other man. He was always welcoming towards me and even showed me his library. I always felt bad for what happened to him. He was a great man, and life has just betrayed him. When we got married, I could still see the sadness in his eyes, although there was a mix of emotions from him. I always felt that Bob never stopped loving my wife, and to some degree my wife still has feelings for him. I know she loves me a lot. She has always treated me like I'm her king and always showed her love to me. Seriously, I'm really lucky to have her in my life. Together, we have 2 children, 7, M, and 5, F. My kids are also close with Bob. Everything was fine until a few months ago. We got the news that Bob has cancer. It was at the last stage and he might not even survive a full year, but there is still a possibility. The news really shattered my wife. She had stopped eating properly and being her usual cheerful self. I understand it, but here is a part where I am a little uncomfortable. She now visits him very often. Most of the time I will be there with her. Then, a few weeks after the discovery, she told me she wants to move into his house. She told me that Bob feels lonely and his siblings do not care about him since his accident, and it will be better if she would just stay with him. I objected. We had an argument and reached a compromise that we are both going to stay. So I've been staying at Bob's house for 2 weeks now. 4 days ago, we were all having dinner, and after we were finished, I decided to do the dishes. My wife and Bob were chatting. The conversation went like this. Bob, I really miss this. I miss talking to you like the good times. My wife, me too. Remember one time we talked so much that we were late for work the next day? It wasn't even important. Bob, what happened to us, Lily? I mean, we were something. People would use us as an example. I miss you a lot. Never thought that when I was dying, you wouldn't be my wife anymore. My wife, I know. At one point I thought that too, but life had other plans. I mean, I love you, but I love my family more. It was not the same after your accident. It was as if they forgot that I was in the kitchen and listening to their conversation. My wife was normal afterward. We went to bed and kissed each other goodnight. Between this, she wanted to make love to me, but I just rejected her. I don't know how to feel about all of this. I trust my wife. I know she is a strong woman with good morals. She will never cheat on me. I know she is just sympathetic toward Bob because their relationship was beyond just exes. They are best friends. I feel like an intruder between them, and I think no matter what my opinion is about all of this, I will always be the bad guy. Comments where OP has replied. Comment 1, you're not the bad guy. In this form, know that you need to talk to your wife about what you heard. Then you need to get to counseling with her and possibly Bob. Cause when Bob does pass, you want to have everything settled, cause she may start saying like, I lost the most important man to me, and then you're going to be severely pushed over the edge. OP, therapy sounds good, I guess. I knew deep down this will come. Replied to a deleted comment. OP, I don't think you understand. You are just assuming she divorced because she was full-time as a caretaker and cannot do that longer. Their marriage failed for that reason. There was no intimacy, no romance. She had a version of what kind of family she wanted, and she has been clear with that since the beginning. She was young back then and had her whole life ahead. Now we have children, and our situation is very different from her first marriage. I know that if I get injured, she will not leave me. She is also in a better financial position than she was 12 years ago, and we can hire nurses if one of us becomes injured, and I don't mind her going once a week to see Bob. Bob is also my friend too. I also visit him sometimes along with my wife. She spends time with me a lot. She has no other family except for Bob. Comment 2. This story makes me sad for all of you. It's understandable she's been upfront about this with you. She loves him and feels guilty she couldn't stay with him and have the life she wanted. It's very sad. You would not have your wife if not for his accident. I wouldn't like this arrangement. It would be very uncomfortable. But you did sign up for this. How are your kids processing all of this? OP. They are mostly sad. Bob is getting weaker every second. They don't know he will be dying, but they are happy to see Bob. Comment 3. This is difficult for many reasons. Reading your post, it almost sounds like you want to be jealous, but I doubt that's really it. If it were jealousy, I feel that you would have had problems long ago. Have you considered that you're grieving for Bob, the man you called a friend? Is it easier to be upset or hurt at your wife than to face his demise? It doesn't sound like there is anything for you to worry about from this relationship itself. It's just difficult emotionally, and that's understandable. You really should see a therapist to help you work through your emotions so you can be there to support your wife and children when he passes. It won't be helpful if you're still suppressing both the hurt of knowing your wife loves someone else and the loss of a friend. Opie, I'm devastated that I am losing a dear friend of mine. Bob never ever tried to hurt me or made me feel like a third man or a man who came between him and my wife. In 2020, I went into a deep depression due to the stress of losing my job. Bob, even though he was disabled, helped me and motivated me to keep going. He is a really good guy, maybe you are right. I'm still in a mix of emotions. Update 1. Alright, I took some of the advice that you guys gave me. Although I was disappointed to see so many emotional people calling me and my wife names without even trying to understand the situation. This will be a long one. Before I give an update, I want to make a few things clear. My wife is awful because she abandoned her husband. No, I disagree with that. There is a difference between terminating a marriage and abandoning. She didn't abandon Bob. She was right by his side. She was just not his wife. I can understand why. She was 29 when this happened. At 29, people are still starting their lives. But her life and her husband's life ended there. You expect her to give up her life, her hopes and dreams, and what? Then resent Bob for the rest of her life. Caretaking can be exhausting. She was emotionally, physically, and financially drained while she was taking care of Bob. Would you have still expected her to give up her life if this happened when she was 21? It's not like she didn't try. They went to therapy and did counseling, but there was no romance, no intimacy. They just grew apart because they both had different dreams. Despite all of that, she was still in his life. She still took care of him. She could have disappeared after her divorce, but she didn't. That's what you call abandonment. Also, the reason why I didn't give all the details was because this was not about her old marriage, but now I'm making it clear because people are assuming things. I know most of your things are black and white, but from a logical perspective, I don't think she is wrong. My wife and Bob are having an emotional affair. Also, no. People who have affairs are secretive. My wife was never like that. She was always upfront and honest about her relationship with Bob and how she would still want to care about him. I do not think there is any affair just because she said she loves him. So what? She says, "I love you" to her kids, her friends, and even my mother. That doesn't mean she is having an affair with all of them. She has kept a boundary between Bob and her. She doesn't love him romantically, but like a friend or family. She doesn't have her own family. She has been in NC with her abusive family since she was 18. Bob was the only family she has ever known. If my wife wanted kids, why didn't she just adopt or do IVF? Like I said in my previous post, she was financially drained. IVF costs a lot here, and adoption with a disabled parent is hard. The agencies hesitate to give a child when one parent is not functional. Then again, they would still need money. My wife wanted children of her own, and if they went to either of the routes, she would have been the one taking care of the baby most of the time along with her husband. Bob almost went broke during all the caretaking. It wasn't until a few years ago he started a remote job that allowed him to stay at home and earn. My wife will leave me if the same thing happened to me. I doubt it, but even if she does, I would understand it. We talked about this before getting married, that if we have tried every possible option, then one of us can divorce. I do not want to be a burden on my own wife, and we are both in our 40s. We have pretty much accomplished every goal in life, so if tragedy does strike, then we are prepared. Bob loves my wife. He could, but there's not much I can do about it. I cannot order him to stop loving, but he does have some feelings for her. Whether it's limerence or not, I do not know though. Bob was in a long-term relationship for 5 years with a girl. I do not think his love for my wife is the same as romantic love. What about my kids? Our kids are here for a while and they live with their grandmother. I do not see why people are acting like we abandoned our kids. Our kids love Bob. They do not know Bob is my wife's ex-husband. They only know that Bob is my wife's friend. They are not mature enough to understand it. Update 2. I took your advice. I just wanted to do the talk when she wasn't stressed. I texted my wife to meet us in our house, not Bob's. I ordered her favorite food and set up the table. When she arrived, she was surprised to see the setup, and I just told her since she has been stressed lately, I wanted to do something good for her. I called my mother. The kids are with her. Bob is staying at the hospital today, so he is fine too, and she can relax. She was happy and thanked me. We talked about our life, and she vented about her job and everything that's been going on. Then I dropped the bomb about her conversation with Bob. I told her about the conversation she was having with Bob and how it made me feel. Well, I like Bob and I know she loves me too, but I cannot help but imagine her wanting to be with him, and it's really like a stab, though I do appreciate her wanting to help Bob. I want to enforce boundaries. I cannot live forever in her ex's house. We have our own house. She needs to think about our kids too. I feel like day by day I'm losing her. This is just my concern and not insecurity. I expected her to flip out and become defensive, but she just cried a lot. She said that she didn't mean to hurt me. She knows she went too far with wanting to stay with Bob. She says she doesn't want Bob to feel alone. That's why she proposed it, and she feels sorry for not listening. She didn't mean to hurt me. She has been thinking about the living situation. I told her it's not enough. I wanted us to talk to a therapist. This whole thing is just a burden on me. She got scared and said, "Why? Nothing's wrong with us." I told her I want to do this just to make sure we are on the same page and there are no hard feelings on either side. Then I asked her if she still wishes to be with Bob because if he didn't have the accident, they would still be together. She told me she has wasted time thinking about what if. She knows we'd probably never meet, or she and Bob could have divorced for a different reason. The thing is, she doesn't want to think about it. What happened just happened. She loves me and doesn't want to be with Bob. Bob has a place in her heart as a friend and family. When she said she loves Bob, doesn't mean she is in love with him. She hasn't thought about him in a romantic way since their divorce. The only reason she stuck with Bob was because they promised to each other, no matter what happens, they will be with each other, even as a friend. She proposed that we move back home and only stay one day a week in Bob's house. She might do occasional visits when it is needed. I agreed, but I still insisted on going to therapy. She agreed to it. We have yet to tell Bob about the news, but I'm sure he will understand. And before you ask, yes, Bob has a full-time nurse. He is family, but they hardly ever visit him. I'll probably not make an update again, and I'm done. No matter how much I try to explain it to you guys, you would only stick to seeing things either black or white. Apparently, in the Reddit world, two exes remaining good friends is considered an emotional affair. They don't need context to understand things. I'm also very much drained emotionally. Bob is also my friend. Seeing him getting weak every day just makes me feel hopeless too. Comments where Opie has replied. Comment 1. I am glad you had that conversation with her. I am rooting for you, and yes, therapy. I always feel like therapy is like an oil change. It is maintenance. If you don't do it, you're screwed, but if you keep it up, you'll be running smoothly. I have a few therapists in my family, so maybe their influence she may need individual therapy too. There is a lot to unpack for her. Opie. Yes, we talked about that. Sorry I forgot to mention that in my post. I told her that she needs to face the ugly reality that Bob might not be in our lives. She needs to prepare for that. She needs therapy for herself to navigate those feelings. She agreed to that. Comment 2. Communication. As much as people would like to vilify the two of you, you are both admirably navigating a sea of gray and doing the best you can. I'm disappointed by this sub's inability to do nuance. Marriage is nuanced. Marriage requires comfort with gray areas. Marriage requires constant give and take. Thank you for sharing with us. Opie. Yep, I think people are way too self-righteous to think about any other possible solution. Yes, morally she should have stayed with her ex and spent the rest of her life taking care of him, no matter how emotionally draining it is, but practically it makes no sense. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Am I the a-hole for wanting to marry my childhood friend, even though her parents disapprove? I, 24M, have grown up in the same neighborhood as Sarah, 24F, since we were kids. We went to the same schools together from kindergarten through high school graduation. I have had a crush on Sarah since I was like 13 years old, but was always too shy to make a move. After high school, we both went to different colleges in the same state. I got an engineering degree while Sarah got a degree in education. We didn't see each other much during college, since we were a few hours apart, but we still kept in occasional touch over social media. After graduating, we both ended up moving back to our hometown, since that is where the most job opportunities were. I got a job as an engineer at a tech company, while Sarah got a job teaching elementary school. Once we were both back, we started hanging out more and more. It almost felt like old times again. Over the last year or so, my childhood crush on Sarah has reappeared and grown into love. We just connect so well and love spending time together. I finally confessed my feelings to her a few months ago and found out she feels the same way. The problem is that Sarah's parents have never approved of me, even when we were just friends as kids. They thought I was a bad influence and prevented Sarah from hanging out with me. This always confused me because I never did anything wrong. Now that Sarah and I want to get married, her parents are angry. They think I'm below their daughter and will hold her back from success. I don't know what the problem is. I am an engineer and have a job. Sarah has tried explaining to them how much we love each other, but they won't listen. Last week, I officially asked Sarah's dad for his blessing to marry his daughter. Not only did he say no, but he threatened to disown Sarah if she marries me anyway. Sarah is devastated by her parents' disapproval. She wants to marry me, but doesn't want to be cut off from her family either. I have told her I will support whatever choice she makes, but I am hopeful we can make this work. I am planning to have one more serious conversation with her parents to clear the air. I want to explain that I love Sarah more than anything, have a great job, and will do everything I can to make her happy. This marriage could be the best thing to ever happen to both of us. So Reddit, AITA for wanting to marry Sarah even though her parents hate me and forbid it? I know they just want what is best for their daughter, but I believe what is best for us is to be together. She is the love of my life and my best friend. I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else. I am hoping her parents will eventually come around, but if not, I think Sarah and I need to follow our hearts. So what do you think, Reddit? Should I back down and just remain friends with Sarah? Or should we move forward with marriage plans and hope her parents change their minds? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. I married Sarah against her parents' wishes, and now her dad has disowned her. When I last posted, Sarah and I were hopeful her parents might eventually come around to supporting our relationship and giving their blessing for us to marry. However, after another conversation with them, it became clear they remained completely opposed to us getting married. Sarah's dad directly told me I was not good enough for his daughter, and he would never let me become part of their family. Her mom also made it clear they would never support our union. Sarah was upset and didn't know what to do. She loved me and wanted to be with me, but was heartbroken her parents would reject her for choosing me. I hated seeing Sarah in so much pain. After a lot of long talks, considering the pros and cons, we decided together that we needed to follow our hearts. Sarah said, as painful as it was, she could never imagine spending her life with anyone else but me. So we made the difficult decision to move forward with getting married, even without her parents' blessing. We knew it might mean Sarah being disowned, but we hoped once we were husband and wife and could show the strength of our relationship, they might accept us over time. Planning the wedding was bittersweet. On one hand, we were thrilled to be marrying the loves of our lives, but it was also hard knowing Sarah's family would not be there to celebrate with us. Sarah has a large extended family with lots of cousins, aunts, uncles, etc. We debated whether to invite them, not knowing if they would even come without her parents' approval. In the end, we decided to invite them, hoping at least some would come. Against her parents' wishes, we decided to have a small, simple courthouse wedding with just our closest friends as witnesses. We didn't want anything flashy or expensive, just an intimate ceremony focused on our love and commitment. The day arrived, and we were over the moon with excitement. All of our best friends were there, happy for us. We knew we had their love and support, even without her family. Just as we arrived, though, we spotted Sarah's parents and other relatives filing into the courthouse. My jaw dropped. I thought they were boycotting our wedding. However, it turned out Sarah's mom had convinced her dad to show up. She said refusing to come would ruin any chance of reunion with Sarah later, So he agreed, though he made it clear he was still opposed and would not participate. Her other relatives followed. Sarah broke down crying, tears of joy to see them. We took it as a promising sign and hoped it meant there was a hope of acceptance. The wedding proceeded beautifully. At the reception, though, reality set in. When Sarah's dad pulled her aside, he told her bluntly that she was no longer his daughter and not to come around their home again. Other relatives looked on awkwardly, not sure what to do. Sarah was heartbroken. I tried my best to comfort her through this heartbreak on our special day. Her mom even came to hug her and apologized, though said she had to stand by her husband's choice. It has now been a few weeks since Sarah was disowned. She is devastated to be cut off from her family, especially right after our wedding. I feel incredibly guilty that she is suffering this way. We are doing our best to focus on the positive, that we have each other now and are starting an amazing new life together. Our friends have become our surrogate family and offer great support, but Sarah's pain is still so fresh. She calls her parents every day, begging them to reconsider, but is met only with silence. My heart aches for my new wife, who should be enjoying newlywed bliss. I keep reassuring Sarah that this is temporary. Once her dad sees we are committed to each other and building a stable, happy life, he will realize what a mistake it was to abandon his only daughter. We must be patient and not give up hope that her family will come around someday. We will all be able to put aside our differences and reunite. At least I pray that will be the outcome. For any others out there facing family disapproval of your relationship, our experience shows you must follow your heart. We are comforted knowing we have each other, no matter what. We look ahead to the bright future we will build as husband and wife. I will provide another update soon on how things are going, and if there has been any progress with Sarah's family. I appreciate all your kind words of support. It means the world to us both and gives us strength during this difficult time. Update 2. Sarah's dad hired a man to try and break up our marriage. It has been about 6 months since Sarah was disowned by her family for marrying me. It had been painful, but we were finally starting to settle into our new normal and focus on building a happy life together. Sarah still greatly missed her family, but the grief was becoming more manageable. That is, until everything went haywire. When a man from Sarah's past unexpectedly reappeared in her life, his name is Brandon, and he and Sarah dated briefly in high school before she ultimately friend-zoned him. I always thought Brandon was sort of immoral and was glad when they broke up. When I was in my senior year, one day when Sarah was coming back home after teaching from school, she met Brandon on the way. They both were surprised to meet each other after so long. Brandon asked her if she wanted to get dinner to catch up. She was surprised but agreed, thinking it would be nice to recall old times. I didn't mind, as I fully trusted her. When she got home that night after dinner, though, she was clearly upset. I asked what had happened, and she hesitatingly told me that over dinner, Brandon made it clear, by the way he was talking, that he was trying to follow her romantically. He kept commenting on how gorgeous she looked, asking if our marriage was happy, and suggesting they get a drink sometime. I was very angry that this creep was unashamedly trying to get my wife to cheat on me. Sarah repeated she had zero interest and made it clear she was happily married. But the mystery of why Brandon was suddenly trying to woo her amused me. Things only got weirder from there. Brandon started popping up everywhere Sarah went. The grocery store, the gym, and even driving by our house. He always had some excuse for being there, but it was obvious he was stalking her. At first, I thought those must be coincidences, but it became clear the guy was deliberately stalking her. Sarah also felt uneasy around him. Things came to a final limit when Brandon popped up in the lingerie section at the mall while Sarah was shopping and tried to make a pervy comment about her buying something special for me. Sarah felt embarrassed and asked him to wait for her as she completed her shopping. Brandon told her that he could help her find the perfect match, just like old times. Sarah showed our marriage ring on her finger and smiled nervously. Brandon said that it was okay and that her marriage would not stop him from complimenting her. He indirectly told her that he still found her beautiful and worthy. The question was, why was Brandon so obsessed with pursuing Sarah all of a sudden? She knew he always had a thing for her in high school, but why reappear now, years later, and follow her even after knowing that she was married? We couldn't figure out his motive. I considered asking Brandon directly and telling him to back the hell off before I got violent. But Sarah worried that could make him angry and, provided the kind of immoral person he was, he may harm me. For now, we just focused on finding strong ways to keep him away. Maybe after some time passes, Brandon will get the message and move on. But something tells me his bizarre fixation on my wife runs deeper than an old high school crush. It is like someone put him up to this. This has also made Sarah miss her family even more, since she feels she has no parents to turn to for comfort and advice. As frustrating as that is, we keep reminding each other that we are in this together, no matter what. I won't let this person, whoever put him up to it, or anyone else try to undermine what Sarah and I have built. We have tolerated so much to be together, and our love can withstand these challenges. 2. For now, we are just taking one day at a time, focusing on supporting each other and trying to move forward. I am hopeful Brandon will eventually fade back into the past where he belongs, but if not, my love for Sarah gives me strength I never knew I had. I won't let anyone intimidate us or disrupt the life we have dreamed of. Update 3. Sarah caught her dad red-handed paying Brandon to break up our marriage. These last few months have been an absolute nightmare. Ever since my wife's high school ex, Brandon, suddenly reappeared and began stalking and harassing her relentlessly. No matter how many times she rejected him, he kept popping up everywhere she went and trying to pursue her romantically. It's taken a huge toll on her mental health. She finally reached her breaking point and decided she needed answers. Her friends thought it was a terrible idea, but while I was at work, she drove over to Brandon's house, determined to confront him face to face. She told all of this to me later when I got home. She walked up to his front door. Before she could even knock, she heard shouting coming from inside. She peered into the window, and what she saw surprised her. There was Brandon in his living room arguing with her estranged father. She couldn't believe her eyes and had to blink a few times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating. What was her dad doing there with the man stalking his daughter? Sarah tried to listen to their yelling. I am done with this, Brandon. It was a mistake to get you involved. And now it has blown up in my face, her dad screamed. Brandon shot back angrily, after everything you promised me. If I broke them up, I am not letting you off the hook, old man. Sarah gasped as she suddenly understood everything. Her dad had paid Brandon to pursue her and to try to end our marriage. Sarah felt sick. How could her own father betray her like this and use her vulnerable history with Brandon to manipulate her? Before she could even process this, their argument continued. Sarah's dad threw a wad of cash at Brandon and said, "Here, take the rest of what I owe you and leave my daughter alone." Brandon snatched the money but said, "I am telling her everything." That's when Sarah burst into the house and shouted, "Too late, Dad. I already heard everything. How could you?" Her dad's face went white. Brandon looked terrified and muttered, "I am sorry, Sarah. Your dad made me do it." Sarah screamed at them both, venting all the hurt and frustration over her dad's disapproval of our marriage. I also couldn't believe he would rather pay to have her stalked than accept who she loves. Sarah told him to stay out of our lives forever. When Sarah told me all this, I was livid, but said my priority was comforting my Sarah. Sarah's dad clearly has issues that he needs to resolve himself, but I won't let his toxicity infect my spirit anymore. Update 4. Brandon came to our house and tried blackmailing me with old photos. Just when Sarah thought things with Brandon couldn't get worse, after discovering her dad hired him to stalk her, he managed to reach a horrific new low yesterday. While I was at work, Sarah was home alone, catching up on laundry, when there was a continuous knocking on the front door. She looked out and saw Brandon standing there. "How dare you come here after everything?" Sarah yelled at him to leave immediately or she would call the cops. But he said, "Oh, I don't think you want to do that, Sarah. Not until you see what I have to show you." He then held up a folder filled with old photos of her from high school. Sarah was completely confused and told him she didn't care about those silly old photos. But then he started describing specific images to jog her memory, and she felt genuinely scared. They were scandalous photos she had sent to Brandon years ago, back when they were dating in school. At the time, she was naive and thought she was just being fun and flirty, but now the idea of Brandon having those private images seemed very dangerous. "Remember now," Brandon said with a twisted grin. I know you don't want dear old hubby or anyone else seeing these pictures of his precious wife, but they might just get leaked accidentally if you don't cooperate. Sarah was absolutely horrified and disgusted that Brandon would try to blackmail her with those photos. She made it clear that she would never do anything to cooperate with his sick scheme, but inside she was terrified. Brandon just laughed and said, "Have it your way, Sarah, but I would check the internet if I were you. These photos have a way of spreading quickly online unless you agree to my demands. I will be in touch." He then blew a kiss goodbye before walking away whistling. Sarah immediately slammed the door shut and started crying. She felt so violated and ashamed, even though she had done nothing wrong. When I got home and saw the state she was in, I was very worried. Sarah explained what had happened. She broke down apologizing for the photos, but I stopped her right away, saying she had nothing to apologize for. I hugged her tight and said, the only person in the wrong was Brandon for his disgusting behavior. I was calm and supportive, insisting those photos didn't change how I saw her. I made her feel safe again. We filed a police report about Brandon's blackmail scheme, but they said the photos themselves didn't amount to enough evidence of a crime. So over the next few days, Sarah and I vigilantly monitored the web to make sure Brandon didn't follow through on exposing those photos. To our relief, they didn't seem to pop up anywhere, but the threat still loomed that Brandon could leak them anytime if we didn't do something soon. As much as I hated letting him have that power, I couldn't bear the thought of Sarah's high school pics becoming public. Update 5. I hatched a plan to get back Sarah's photos from that creep Brandon. After the trauma my wife, Sarah, went through when her toxic ex, Brandon, showed up demanding she cooperate with some sick scheme or else he would leak scandalous photos from her past, I could hardly sleep. Sarah was filled with shame and anxiety that Brandon would follow through on exposing those pictures she sent him naively years ago. As much as I reassured her it didn't change how I see her, I knew the potential public humiliation terrified her. We contacted the police, and they said they couldn't do much without solid evidence that Brandon was blackmailing her. So even with a restraining order against him, the threatening photos remained in his possession, a constant source of distress for my poor wife. I felt helpless to protect Sarah from this person who was exploiting her worst insecurities. But then I realized I had to take matters into my own hands. If the authorities wouldn't step in, I decided I would get those photos away from Brandon myself, using any means necessary. I couldn't bear to see Sarah living in fear anymore. That bastard wasn't going to win this sick power game. So I started devising a plan. My first thought was I could just beat Brandon until he gave me the pictures, but I realized violence could make things worse legally. I had to be smarter. After days of scheming, I came up with an idea that just might work. I was going to try framing Brandon by planting drugs in his car and calling the cops to bust him during a staged meetup. I hoped that with Brandon facing drug charges, the cops would have cause to search his home and discover the blackmail materials related to Sarah. 2 birds, 1 stone. I decided to ask Trevor, a shady guy I went to high school with who now deals drugs, for some pills and powder to plant. I told him it was for a prank and gave him $300. Next, I reached out to Brandon, pretending to be Sarah, saying I changed my mind and wanted to meet him at the park to talk terms. As expected, the pervert took the bait immediately. Right before the scheduled meetup, I slipped the drugs under the driver's seat of Brandon's unlocked car while it was parked outside his place. At the park, I secretly trailed Brandon as he arrived first and waited for Sarah, keeping a safe distance away. Right on time, 2 cop cars I had tipped off came screeching into the lot. It was hard not to smile watching the cops discover the drugs in Brandon's car as I peeked from behind a tree. Brandon turned pale as a ghost when they cuffed him. I couldn't believe my plan was working. Shortly after Brandon was hauled back to the station, a forensic team arrived at his house with a warrant to comb for evidence related to the drug charges against him. I held my breath all that night, waiting and praying they would find Sarah's photos. The next morning, an officer called to tell us Brandon was going away to prison and that Sarah's personal materials would be returned to her shortly. When I gave her the news, the relief on Sarah's face brought me to tears. The nightmare was finally over. That evening, after we burned every photo, Sarah hugged me. This experience brought Sarah and I closer than ever, knowing we will always protect each other. As thankful as I am that her photos will stay private, the bigger reward is seeing my amazing wife feel safe and free again. Her beautiful spirit deserves to soar brightly, with no shadows from the past holding her down. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Wife changed after I lost my high-paying job, so I took a waiter job and caught her cheating with her ex. I, 31, am. Recently divorced my ex-wife, 28, F, because of her lies and infidelity. My wife and I first met in a shopping mall. I had gone to the mall to get some items, since I shopped only twice a month. As I was about to leave the mall that day, my wife came to me and asked if I could look at her car, which had refused to turn on. While helping her check her car, I realized that her problem was minor, and I helped her fix it. Originally, I had no intentions of becoming friends with her or anything because I only wanted to help her and leave, but in the process of helping her fix her car, we had a great conversation, and we ended up exchanging contacts. After that day, we didn't see each other again until a week later. I had forgotten entirely about her, and if she had not called me again, things would not have gotten so serious between us. Long story short, my wife and I started going out on our free days, and as we got to know ourselves better, love happened. We dated for only a year and married afterward. Before my wife and I settled down, she told me about her previous relationship, and I told her about mine. According to my wife, her rich ex-boyfriend maltreated and physically abused her. They dated for 4 years, but in terms of taking care of her, giving her money and gifts, he was pretty generous with that. From what I understood, my wife claimed she had to leave her abusive ex-boyfriend because she was tired of being cheated on and abused. I understood her because I had a friend in an abusive relationship too, and I saw how hurt she was all the time. I even assured my wife that our marriage would be her safe haven, and I would never raise my hands on her, no matter how angry I would be, and I meant it. I had never hit a woman before and didn't plan on starting with her. Since my wife was already living with me from the 5th month of our relationship, being married was not so different, except for us wearing our wedding bands and the pictures we had decorated at home. For the first few months of our marriage, everything was so smooth. My wife showered me with so much love and made me feel like the only man in the world. Since the house I lived in was given to me by my late dad, we didn't need to pay rent. We only had to pay utility bills, groceries, and gas. Honestly, I was the one who took care of the bills. I earned enough money to take care of both of us, and I was comfortable doing that. I never asked her about her salary or what she did with her money. I felt it was my responsibility to take care of her and the bills since she was already used to that lifestyle. 1 year passed, and we were still living in harmony, except for a couple of issues with my work. From the 10th month of our marriage, something happened at the organization I worked at, and for a whole month I wasn't paid. Not being paid affected a lot of things at home because I couldn't do the things I used to do before. Initially, when we realized at work that we wouldn't be paid for that month, I wasn't bothered because I believed my wife would take care of the bills at home until things returned to normal, but I was so wrong. That day, I went home to tell my wife I wasn't paid, thinking she would pacify me and take over things for a while, but she shocked me. She started being so dramatic and then made a fuss out of it. She asked me what we would do, and I told her to take care of the house until things were normal. Guess what, guys? My wife said she would only agree to help with the house if I agreed to pay interest on all the money she would spend when she said so. I thought she was joking, but she wasn't. She meant every word she said. Her response shocked me, considering everything I had done for her since we started dating until our marriage. Honestly, I would not have believed it if I had been told she would say something like that. Ultimately, I agreed to her terms, and she counted every penny she would spend and gave me her interest rate. As if paying interest and refunding her money was not enough, that same week, my wife's attitude towards me changed entirely. Before I had issues with my job, she used to be so clingy and would repeatedly profess her love to me. But once she started paying the bills at home, everything changed. She no longer allowed me to touch her, and she changed from the talkative she used to be to a very cold person. I noticed all these changes, and when I confronted her about it, she said it was her new mood and that if I had any problem with it, I should deal with it. Even how she talked to me changed, and the respect was gone. Everything happened so fast, and in a twinkle of an eye, I didn't know who my wife was anymore. To make things worse, the company I worked for had to lay off some people, and I had to go after getting my salary. When this happened, I didn't tell my wife about it because she was already making staying with her at home unbearable. I told my friends about it, and thankfully, one of them reached out to someone who had just opened a fancy restaurant, and I got a job there. I worked as a waiter for almost 2 months at this fancy restaurant and didn't tell my wife about it. The pay was smaller compared to my previous salary, but it was better than doing nothing and being insulted by the woman who used to tell me I was the air she breathed. As for the bills at home, after 2 months of her adding her insane interest rate to the money she spent, I had to stop that and we started splitting 50-50ths. Even with us splitting the bills, our marriage did not go back to how it used to be. But I wasn't even bothered about that because my only focus was to keep applying for jobs until I got a better job than serving at the restaurant. Somehow, I believed my wife's respect would return after I got back to my old financial status. One day, I was at the restaurant trying to sort the orders of customers that just came in when I spotted my wife walking into the restaurant. When I saw her, my heart skipped because I thought she had gotten information that I was working there. But to my greatest surprise, she walked to a table where a man was already waiting for her, and they lip-locked. My heart broke instantly, and when I realized it was her ex-boyfriend, who she told me she had cut all contact with, I nearly peed in my pants. One of my coworkers working there before me saw the shock on my face and asked if everything was all right. It took me a few seconds to respond to him, and when I did, I told him about my wife and ex-boyfriend. He was also surprised and confused but understood better when I told him my wife didn't know I was working there. The coworker that talked to me and I were close, so he devised a plan for me. After we agreed on the plan, he went to take their orders. The plan was he would go and take their order, and once their food was ready, I would go and serve them while he would record everything from behind. I did as we had planned. I took the food to my wife and her ex-boyfriend without breaking my stride. When she looked in my direction and saw me, her face turned pale, and she spat out the red wine she was drinking out of surprise. I ended up leaving the food in front of her and her ex-boyfriend, and while I took my time to do that, she literally froze and could not say a word. Later that day, she did not come back home. I knew she wouldn't, so I gleefully packed her stuff and left them outside. The next morning, she came to beg and give her usual cheater's line of, "Baby, I can explain. It's not what you think." This was the longest sentence she had said to me in days, and if I had not seen her, she probably would have kept cheating on me. I felt generous with my words, so I told her to return to her rich ex-boyfriend and enjoy her toxic relationship. She didn't say much after that. She just packed her stuff and left. I even doubt her tears were real. Weeks later, we divorced and everything ended between us. Luckily, for months after I worked at the restaurant, I landed a good job with a juicy offer. I even forgot to add that my coworker and I posted my wife's video online. We covered her boyfriend's face but left hers for the world to see, and it went viral. I wouldn't like to be specific, but she's made it to the meme section, and each time I remember the look on her face on that video, it makes me laugh. I couldn't even cry over her. I moved on like nothing had happened because she had badly hurt and disrespected me in the past few months. And the two things I couldn't take from a woman were cheating and disrespect. I'm fine now, but I'm in no rush to be in a relationship because most women are horrible pretenders. They are so good at saying, "I'll be your ride or die," but they leave when something happens. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Parents favored my brother. They missed my milestones for his events, so I didn't tell them about my wedding. Now they're facing shame and divorce. So, I, 27F, have a younger brother, Mike, 21M. He is the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always complaining, always expecting others to bow to him. Just overall, ever since he was born, my parents fussed over him for everything. He's not special needs or had a traumatic birth or anything of the sort. He was just born, and my parents completely discarded me. My mom, 50F, especially, went from a loving mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of on the internet. My father, 50M, still showed me love and support, but he's always been too much of a coward to stand up to my mother and let me win at least once. The only one who stood for me was my grandpa, 76M, who always called my parents out on their behavior and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandma, and we have a very special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country, and I could never see him often. Mike knows our mom prefers him and loves to shove it in my face. Because of this and his behavior, we've always been at odds. He's spoiled, a brat, and an awful human. I can't remember how many times I ended up in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he framed me with. His only talent is his football skills. He won a scholarship to a nice college out of state. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because, apparently, my fund had been used to cover expenses after a fire, just for me to discover years later that said money was given to Mike to buy a car and a house. It's at public university that I met Lucas. He was the first person I was really drawn to. There, of course, I met new people who are now my dearest friends. Thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now, both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and have very good salaries. Now, to the main issue, Lucas proposed to me a year ago. We're very private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything. When I told my parents, they dismissed it with a "that's nice." I'm starting to think they downright didn't listen to me at all. We decided that we wanted a nice but simple ceremony and reception with our friends and relatives. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never responded to the invite. Whenever I went to visit and began to talk about my wedding, without mentioning it was a wedding, my mom would always speak over me and about my brother's accomplishments and wild adventures. At one point, I got fed up with it and interrupted my mom to tell her that there was an event I was planning to organize, whose date was unmovable. She told me that they couldn't attend because my brother was playing the last game of the season that very same day and wanted them to be there. Of course, this favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballet shows and both my high school and university graduations for things about him. At this point, I wanted to be petty. I told both my parents that it wasn't a problem to miss this event, purposely admitted the fact that this event was my wedding, and didn't insist further. Flash forward to a few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were all there and we had a blast. My grandpa was happy to give me away, and it was just perfect. My relatives asked me multiple times why my parents weren't there with us. I was honest and simply said they had my brother's game to attend and couldn't come. They gave me a few looks, and my grandpa was visibly angry for a while, but otherwise nothing strange happened. After the reception, Lucas and I left for our honeymoon and were phone-free for the whole duration of the trip. But once we got back, we discovered that a storm was, well, coming. I turned my phone on and was unable to even unlock it before a storm of notifications popped up. Most of them were from my mother and brother. Mike called me all sorts of nasty names and insulted me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted the photos of the wedding on Facebook and captioned it with a very obvious dig at my parents, especially my mom, for missing the wedding. The post apparently went viral in my parents' community, and they've been publicly shamed for their mistreatment of me. It also turns out that my grandpa personally visited my parents to go on a tirade to shame my father, his son, to the point of tears. This seemed to be my father's breaking point because he was so distraught for missing his only daughter's wedding and for his father's disapproval that he finally rebelled against my mom and is threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's the reason why my mom has been spamming my phone with messages. At first insulting and threatening, and then downright pitiful, full of begging and pity parties. Now I'm at home with my husband, deciding how to approach the situation. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite to the wedding, reached out to apologize for what I went through and to claim they had no idea this was happening. I can't blame any of my relatives. They all live with my grandpa on the other side of the country or in another state. But my mom's sisters and friends are belittling me for not telling my mom about the wedding because now she's inconsolable at the thought of having missed my wedding. Personally, I think she just claims that to save face, but I'm not sure. The latest messages from my father and mother seem extremely saddened and hurt for missing my wedding. Now my family is divided on three fronts. The majority who is sticking by my side, my maternal aunt shaming me for hurting my mom's feelings, and my maternal grandparents who are adamant that I forgive my mom in light of her atonement. My best friends are telling me not to listen to them. Edit. Thank you so much for the feedback and love. It's overwhelming. I'm going to address the popular questions here. 1. I did inform my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional paper invites to all my guests and was notified that all invites had reached their addresses. I did not receive any answer from my parents and Mike, a few very distant relatives, and some people on Lucas's side. I did reach out to all of them through message to double check, and those who hadn't replied told me they couldn't come. I asked my parents and brother via text, but they didn't respond. I was left on read, knowing them, and given all the things I had to plan, I didn't bother insisting. 2. I didn't repeat the date of my wedding because I had already been told there was my brother's game. Plus, every time I insisted on highlighting my celebrations to get an answer, I was always told that it wasn't that important and to not be pissy and a bother because some things were simply more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair for me to not insist anymore. It's not worth the effort. 3. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I avoided telling my parents that it was my wedding to see if they would be interested in the slightest, but surprise, surprise, they weren't. Despite this, I did openly talk about my wedding with my aunts and uncles. My mother was in the room with us a few times when I discussed venues or dress shops with my aunt. The FB post. But sometimes Mom was on the phone, and other times she was just chatting with other people. She never paid attention when I talked about it. During reunions, she smiled and said, "That's great, dear," and then would change the subject. Radio silence on Dad and Mike. For I kept in contact with them because, well, all the times I tried to go and see in the past years, I've been harassed. I tried after my high school, bachelor's, and master's graduations, to which they never bothered to show up for reasons involving my brother. Every time, I was shamed for daring to turn my back on family by my parents, my brother, my maternal aunts, and my maternal grandparents. I think the turning point here is that all those times Lucas wasn't by my side. We started dating a little after my last attempt at going and see, and now that I have him here, I feel more confident in my stance. But before that, I wasn't confident. As I already stated, all my paternal side lives on the other side of the country and wasn't aware of how they treated me. I did try to expose my parents once at 14. My aunts, uncles, and grandpa reprimanded them. They faked being sorry, and then once home, I got the beating and gaslighting of my life for lying. After that, I kept in regular contact with my paternal side but admitted my parents' abuse out of fear, which, TBH, still haunts me to this day. Only Grandpa knew, but he was always threatened to be alienated from me if he tried anything. 5. My parents and I are not from the same city. I live in a city an hour's drive from my parents' small town, and they don't know my new address because once my brother tried to break into my apartment to steal some cash, and my mother backed him up, claiming that siblings share their goods. Now I moved, and I'll be sure not to tell them where I live. 6. My parents didn't buy my brother a car and a house before he even started high school. They bought him a car for his 16th birthday and a house near his college when he began freshman year. They didn't spend the money of my fund right away. They just lied to me to use it later for my brother, keeping it stored for later in the meantime. Update. To those who believed my story was fake, I want to say that I'm happy your family life is better than mine, to the point of thinking of my reality as a fantasy. But I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me and sending DMs claiming that I'm writing a fake story. If I've missed a few details in the OG post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out because of my family's harassment. You are not forced to read my story or think it's true, but I think keeping the smallest amount of decency would be nice. Oh, and before diving in the update, let me clarify a few things. 1. Yes, the invitation specifically stated it was a wedding. No excuses. 2. My maternal side of the family didn't come to the wedding. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear in the OG post. Most of them were busy, and the others just gave me excuses to send a gift but not come. That's it. Don't ask me why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mom. It's not like I live in their brain. 3. My mother's atonement is the fact that she apologized via text. Now on to the update. Things have been a little crazy this past week. I got off of Reddit for a couple of days to gather my thoughts. Then I had a lengthy conversation with Lucas about how to proceed. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could ever love him more than I already do. My parents were always a taboo topic, but he hit me with a brutal reality check that I absolutely needed. We reached the conclusion that the fact I kept in contact all this time, stuck around, and couldn't go and see isn't healthy. I've realized that the reason I never fully went and see was that deep down I just wanted their approval, even now. Pathetic, I know, but it's like a drug. Being with my parents. They can be loving, funny, caring, and warm until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But that's enough. I promised myself that things are going to change. I've thought about it and decided to start therapy and to go and see with all those who made an issue about this situation, for good this time. After days dedicated to reflecting on how I feel, I ended up messaging my father to tell him that if he wanted to talk, I would meet him, Mom, and Mike in a neutral location the following day. He immediately replied and agreed, and we met at the park. My father's sisters and brother accompanied us for damage control. My father looked distraught and as if he had been crying for a while. My mom looked the same, but I think it was more out of anger and embarrassment. My brother looked annoyed. I told the three of them about how their behavior and preference in regards to my brother always hurt me, and that their abusive behavior made me realize that I didn't want contact with any of them again. After that meeting, my mother tried to cut me off multiple times, but my aunt, the one who posted on FB, shut her up every single time. When I asked them why they would treat me this way, they didn't know what to say. My father kept crying and apologizing without giving me an answer, and my uncle reprimanded him for it. My mother seemed as if she was asking herself that for the first time, but well, in the end, she just said that she simply disliked me. Plain and simple. And my brother? He just liked the attention and making me miserable as some kind of sport. I went on with my questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invite, they claimed to have never received one. I showed them the texts, but they denied receiving them. And well, it turns out that they hadn't, in fact, received my wedding invitation. When it arrived at their house, they weren't there. The only one in the house was my brother, who had come visiting for the weekend. He saw the invite and, as many of you guessed, ripped it up and trashed it. And then, when I texted my parents, he deleted the messages. Wasn't hard to do. According to him, they kept my chat archived and didn't get the notification. So my parents never actually got a formal invitation. I was just distraught. I asked Mike why he would do that, and he just shrugged and claimed that it wasn't as important as the stuff they had in their program anyway. I had to stop Lucas from punching him in the face. Strangely enough, my parents were upset and started reprimanding him. He actually began to throw a tantrum and cry crocodile tears, and I must admit that I was kind of satisfied. But then my mom claimed that all was resolved. There was no need to fuss over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear their name. That set me off, and I interrupted her, telling her that they weren't forgiven at all. That just because Mike trashed the invite, it didn't mean it automatically canceled all their neglect out. Plus, all that time, it was still very obvious that I was having a wedding, and they should have asked about it. You want to know my mother's response? She said something along the lines of, "I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios." She was convinced Lucas didn't actually like me nor would ever marry me. When I tell you I was about to trash her face, do you believe me? Another thing came up. It turns out that my brother didn't have a football game to go to. All my parents used the fact that my husband, friends, and I know little to nothing about football, we prefer soccer, and the fact I stopped asking about it when Mike would mock me during his time in high school to make up a story to avoid my event. At the time I wrote the OG post, I couldn't confirm or deny the presence of a game because my brother has private social media, and Lucas and I are blocked, and I foolishly trusted my parents' word. But no. You want to know where they went with that man-child? They went to Disneyland because Mike wanted to go. They used the football story to cover for my brother's 100th trip from holiday, and apparently, they did it multiple times in the past months. At that point, I was just completely burned out and overwhelmed by this amount of information. The fact that I had been fooled this badly, that I was so willingly ignorant, made my blood boil and I snapped. I stood up and told my father he was a sad, weak man unable to stand up for his kids unless his wife approved of it. I told my brother he was a poor excuse of a man who will not accomplish anything in his life and that he'll always live like the leech he is, baby to the point of uselessness. And to my mom, I told her that she was the worst narcissist, pathetic little woman on earth, that she didn't even deserve to be addressed and judged for her irrelevance, that not even God could help her out because she is just too rotten. Harsh, I know. My mother shot up from her seat to scream at me halfway through my rant to her, but I was just too mad. I shouted at her to shut up and sit down and listen for once. She got so mad it felt like steam was coming out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking and talking. It felt as if all my anger and hurt just flooded out. At one point, I'm pretty sure the whole park was silent. I spat at my parents and Mike that I was disowning them all and that if they're smart, they'll think before reaching out again. I took my purse and left with Lucas, Anna, and Francis, leaving my parents and brother at my aunt's and uncle's mercy. I think at some point the reality of what I had just learned and said finally hit me because I ended up having a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped me through it until we stopped in a parking lot to calm me down. I am beyond grateful for their help. Once home, I just fell on the bed and went to sleep. I really wanted to follow you guys' advice and post the whole thread on FB, but given my work and career, I couldn't expose myself like that. One thing is sharing my story from an anonymous throwaway on Reddit. The other is on FB with my name and face plastered everywhere. I couldn't go down that path. Instead, I did something better. I made a folder with all of my mother's insults, messages, and awful comments and sent it to the woman in charge of my mom's church. It's a tight-knit community my mom worked her ass off to enter in, but that is also extremely judgmental, and being shunned by them is a death sentence. And well, that's exactly what happened, just like clockwork. The scandal spread like wildfire, going out of the church and reaching the rest of the small town. You can imagine what this means for my mother and father because of my little spill. I did find other messages from my maternal side of the family belittling me even more for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I just didn't care anymore at that point, so I followed you guys' advice and told them that from now on they will no longer be part of my life and that they can talk all they want. I just won't care. Instead, they should be grateful I don't send their nasty texts to their employers and spouses. I blocked every single one of them, grandparents included, on everything. I did find a lengthy message from my father. He apologized for not being strong enough to face my mother, agreed that what I said was true, and couldn't believe that he had lost so much of my life because of her. He told me he is going to divorce her no matter what my decision will be because he is tired of being controlled. He would like a relationship with me to make up for all the years that passed. I did reply to him to tell him that as of now I really don't want to see him or forgive him. He has replied that he'll try his best to win me back and that he loves me. I replied back that, as of now, I find that hard to believe and then blocked him too. Frankly, his slimy way of trying to have an out from this situation by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least she was hateful and owned up to it. He is only able to blame others for his choices. I don't want to surround myself with people like that. My mother and brother are blocked similarly too. My maternal side, Mike wrote other messages to taunt and insult me, and I just blocked him. My mom threw herself a pity party for being shunned by her community and for her marriage going into shambles, and I just replied, good, before blocking her too. As for my grandpa, he has decided to stay with us for a while to stick by my side. He really is the best and has read some of your comments. He isn't going to admit that he's flattered by them. Since then, a few days have passed, and all has been quiet. Lucas is spoiling me rotten, and I'm starting therapy soon. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My demanding daughter-in-law barred me from attending my grandson's first birthday in my own home. So I packed their bags, changed the locks, and kicked them out to teach her a lesson. I am a 66-year-old single man. I lost my wife 3 years ago, and since then I have been single. Actually, I'm heartbroken. Next Sunday is my grandson's birthday, and my DIL has not invited me to the party. I didn't even know there was a party organized until my friend, who was their neighbor, told me. His granddaughter got an invitation card to my grandson's birthday. He didn't know I was not invited. We go for morning walks together. On our way to the walk, he told me about the party. It was shocking because I am very close to my grandson, and he loves me too. He is turning 1 next Sunday. When my friend told me about the party, I thought it was a small cake-cutting event with just the kids of neighbors, but my friend told me that the party was going to be grand, And not only the kids but the adults were also invited to the party. The invitation says, kids names +1. The invitation includes a dinner as well. This was unbelievable because my son is not that well off to spend so much money for his son's birthday party. I snapped at my friend that he was exaggerating, but he sent me a picture of the invitation card later. He was right. The party seemed big. It left me wondering why I was not invited to the party. It made me anxious. To pacify myself, I said maybe they had forgotten to invite me, or maybe the invitation is on the way. There are still 12 days left for the party. My anxiety got the best of me, and I went to meet my grandson. When I went there, I saw my DIL immersed in her phone while my grandson was playing by himself on the lawn. I picked him up and played with him while my DIL stared at me from the window. My DIL has always been resentful of me. She has never liked me or my wife. I quite don't get the reason behind her dislike, but maybe she thinks we are inferior to her. Actually, she is from a well-off family, but we are not rich. We ain't poor, but we don't have as much money as her dad. Besides money, it's a matter of social status as well. Her father is a lawyer, but I'm just a mechanic and run a garage. If she's proud of her dad's money, then it's a hollow pride because her father resents her and doesn't give her a penny even when she needs it the most. Last year, during COVID, when my son lost his job, their finances were affected very badly. She's a homemaker. They had just one source of income. Losing that job was a mighty blow to them. They started living on their savings, but eventually that also dried up. My garage business also dwindled during the COVID lockdown, yet I helped them in whichever way I could, but my finances were also running tight. Their situation got so bad that they were not able to pay their house rent and got an eviction notice from the owner. I was living alone, so I offered them to move into my house while I moved to my garage. I have a 2-bedroom house with a kid's room. I could have stayed in my house with them, but I knew that my DIL would be uncomfortable around me. That's the background of my situation. When I went to meet my grandson this morning, I thought my DIL would tell me about their birthday plan, but to my disappointment, she didn't say a word. Until now, I was hoping that she had forgotten to invite me, but now it seems evident that she doesn't want me there. It breaks my heart to think what wrong did I do to her to get this treatment. I have always tried to make their life comfortable, help them out, and this is what I get in return. Update 1. Thanks for all the kind words. You guys are right. We and laws, especially in our 60s, are treated as third-class citizens by our DILs. It does feel very lonely in this world. 60s indeed is a hard time. It's like too old to live and still young to die. I tell you, my friend, if you have a partner at your age in your 60s, treasure them because you're going to miss them like hell. I never felt the need for a friend until I lost my wife, but after her demise, my life is just so empty. Yesterday, my son called me and said they would be dropping the grandson to me. They're going out for shopping. Yes, I babysit for them because hiring a nanny involves money, and here this old man gives them free service. They know how to exploit me emotionally, financially, and through all means. When they came to pick him up, I asked my son, "Done with the party shopping?" My son's face turned pale. His car's back seat was filled with stuff, and some of the decorative stuff was popping out from the back window. He dismissed it and said, "Oh no, there's no party. We bought some toys for the baby." That's it. He is not good at lying. I looked at him with a straight face and said, "I saw the invitation card that was given to the neighbors." Before my son could say anything, Dell yelled, "So what? Are you pissed because you needed an invitation to a kid's birthday party? Are you a toddler?" The way she defended it made me mad. I was furious, yet I responded calmly, "Watch your tone, lady." My son said he would visit me the next day to sort out the matter. I kept waiting, but he didn't show up. How naive of me to think he would come to me to apologize for his wife's behavior and request me to join the party. I know what you guys are thinking, delusional old junkie. Yeah, that's me. I was wondering how they were able to manage the expenses of such a big party. Then I realized that they were hosting a party with my money. Last month, my son borrowed money from me to pay the mortgage on his car. He said he had defaulted for 2 months, and now the bank was behind him for the payment. He promised to return it this month. Whenever he borrows money from me, I know that he's not going to return it, yet I lend him. I know I'm soft on him, but look at my situation. I have just one son to call a family. I have only a handful of years left. What am I going to do with my money? It is ultimately going to him, so why not give it to him when he needs it? Until now, I never asked him to return the money I lent him, but today I called him and asked for the money I lent him last month. I said, "You promised to return it this month, didn't you? So where is it?" He didn't ever expect that his dad would ask him to return the money. I said, "I want the money by this week, as you made the promise." He said, "What?" I affirmed, "You heard it right. I want my money by this week." He came to visit me in the evening. I confronted him about his wife's resentment towards me. He said he was aware of it but couldn't help much. I said, "Of course, you can't force your wife to love me, but you can surely stop lying to me for money. I know you lied about the car mortgage thing to borrow the money for this birthday party. I also know that this party is not for the kids only. Their parents are also invited, and that too for dinner. Really, you have so much money to feed your friends and neighbors. But not me, whose money you're putting for the event." After my rant, he said, "Are you mad because we didn't invite you? If yes, then it's not me. Sandra prepared the guest list." I yelled, "And you have no say in that? Is Sandra's decision some kind of law that cannot be changed or challenged? Are you telling me you are okay that your wife doesn't invite your father to your kid's first birthday party, and without any reason?" He stood silent with a sullen face. What else would he do? He is too weak to open his mouth in front of his narcissistic wife. He is helpless to defend himself in front of me because he needs my money. Sometimes I blame myself for not raising a strong son. Update 2. I was not keen on taking any revenge, but guess what I did? Sandra crossed all limits of toxicity and gaslighting. On the afternoon of the birthday, I was sitting at the corner of my garage drinking and sulking when I got a call from my son. I was so stupid to think maybe his guilty conscience had kicked in, and he was calling me to invite me to the party. Don't cuss me if I say I even bought gifts for my grandson. I thought if they invited me last minute, I would have to rush. I know I surpassed all levels of desperation. I thought even if they didn't invite me, I owe a gift to my grandson, and I would give it to him the next day. To shatter my daydreaming, the call was to babysit my grandson. My son had to rush to the office for some immediate work. He said Sandra had gone to pick up her parents from the airport. Hearing this, I lost my mind. I mean, her parents are flying from 2 states away, but I am not invited, who lives a block away. Before I could say anything, he said he was already in his car, leaving the baby alone in the crib so I should hurry up. Without any second thought, I rushed to care for my grandson. While I was playing with him, the phone rang. I ignored it a few times, but it kept buzzing. I thought it must be some emergency call, so I answered it. It was Sandra at the other end, and the call was for my son. She was calling him to give some instructions about the decoration. She had been calling him on his phone, but he was not answering. She flipped out on hearing my voice. I said, "I'm not trespassing at your house. Your husband had to rush to the office urgently, so he requested me to babysit your son." She screamed at me, asking me to leave the house because she didn't want her parents to see me. I said, "How do you want me to leave a little boy alone at home?" She said she would be there in an hour. The boy could manage to be alone until then, but she didn't want me to be present at her home when her parents came. She said I stink of gas and oil and that my hands and clothes are dirty with grease. I look filthy, and she doesn't want her parents or anyone to see me at her house. I felt humiliated by this. It was outrageous. I cried like a baby, holding my grandson in my arms. I can't explain to you guys how terrible I felt at that moment. Quickly, I picked myself up to leave because if she arrived and saw me there, she would break 7 hells on me. While locking the door behind me, an idea stuck in my mind. Damn, it's my house. Yeah, that's right. I gave them my house to live in as a goodwill gesture. And no, they don't pay rent to me. I was like, "Lady, I'm done being a doormat." I quickly called up my workmen with toolboxes. They helped me change the locks of the house, pack their clothes and other belongings, and trash them out on the front porch. All the big items like furniture and electronics were mine. They didn't bring any. After that, I held my grandson and sat on the front lawn, waiting for Sandra to arrive. As soon as I saw her car entering the driveway, I went towards it, handed over the baby to her through the window, and walked towards my car. She sat the baby in the car, or maybe gave it to her parents, and came behind me yelling. She screamed at me as to why I was still here when she had asked me to leave. I didn't bother to look at her or respond. I just sat inside my car and said, "If you need any help moving your stuff out, call me." Before she could react or understand, I drove off. Just a few minutes later, she was blowing up my phone with calls. I ignored it. Then she sent me voicemails asking why the lock was not opening and why their stuff was thrown outside the house. I laughed at her messages. I was like, "Woman, get a hint. You have become homeless." I went to my garage and sat at the entrance. I knew she or my son would pop up soon, and there she was. She came charging at me. I said, "Before any evil thoughts come to your mind, let me tell you there's a camera installed everywhere, and it is fully functional." She yelled and basically repeated the same stuff. Why the house was not opening. I said, "I changed the locks, and the key is inside the garage, which stinks of oil and grease and other nuisances. Would you like to touch that key?" She was aghast. She pulled her hair and screamed, "Why did you change the locks?" I stared at her and replied with a straight face, "Remember that house is mine. I did a favor by letting you all live there." She cut me off and said, "Then why did you throw our stuff out?" I said, "Because I changed my mind. Now I don't want you guys to be living there." She stamped her foot, went back to her car, and drove off. I knew this was not over. After some time, my son showed up with red, teary eyes. That's his technique of manipulation. He was like, "Dad, please give us the keys. I promise Sandra will be nice to you. She's going to apologize to you." I stopped him right there. "Really? Sandra is going to apologize to me? Where is she?" His face lit up and he asked me if Sandra apologized, would I give the house back to them? I said, "I don't know. I might consider it depending upon how she does it." He stood up to call Sandra. The way he was talking seemed that she was not ready to apologize. But within 10 minutes she arrived. She started off by saying, "Look, I'm sorry." I said, "Hold on. Let's sit inside the garage and talk." She was reluctant to get in, but my son gave her a look, and she followed us inside, covering her face with a napkin. Her sorry felt like it was a favor to me. She was like, "Okay, sorry. I won't yell at you again. Give us the keys. My parents are waiting outside. They are tired from the journey." I was dumbfounded at her way of apologizing. I looked at my son with wide eyes. She was like, "Okay, sorry again. Enough of making faces. Our guests will be in soon. We need to arrange everything, and yeah, you can join the party too, but please wear new clothes." I could not bear her tone anymore. I stood up and screamed, "Get out. Just get out of here and never show your bloody face ever again. You are not getting the house ever again. Not even when I die." Instead of being sorry for her behavior, she started yelling at my son. "See, I told you he isn't going to listen. We should call the cops on him." He shrugged off her hands and yelled back, "That's his house. We cannot call the cops on him. Cops are going to bash us for mistreating him." He left the garage, yelling at each other. My friend who lived next door said that Sandra and my son came back and told her parents what had happened. Maybe she was trying to manipulate the truth. When my son intervened and explained the whole truth, her parents were heard yelling at her. Then they handed over the baby to her and left. A few of the children also arrived for the birthday party. My son asked them to come back after an hour. They quickly loaded their trunk with as much stuff as they could and drove off. After some 30 minutes, they sent out an apology email to everyone that the party had been canceled. Some of their big suitcases are still lying on the porch. The friends and neighbors were not stupid enough to not guess what had happened. The party got canceled last minute, and the stuff lying outside adds up to most of the things that they are being kicked out of the house. That was all that happened until now. I feel no remorse for doing this. They had pushed all my buttons, and I could not just stand there and take it. Update 3. My loser son showed up at my door again. 1 week went by since I had kicked them out. It was almost midnight when I heard his knock on the door. I opened the door and said I didn't have any business with him. He held my hands and started begging me to let him inside the house. He said he had been living in the car for a week. He doesn't have enough money to lease another house with his income. It is difficult to make ends meet even for the household expenditure. He started crying that he could not afford to bear the rent. I said, "Why don't you ask your entitled wife to get a job?" He said, "She just doesn't want to work. She thinks of herself as a prize for him because she was way out of his league." I burst out in laughter. "Sure, then show off your trophy to get bread. This old man has done enough for you all." I said, "Your wife has always been narcissistic towards me, yet I gave all my support to you. I gave up on my house and lived in the garage because I loved you and wanted you to be comfortable. What did you give me in return? You let your wife humiliate me. Don't you have a spine to take a stand? Yeah, you have a golden wife and you surely cannot upset her. Then live off with that gold and don't come to me for help." He tried his last bet by saying, "Please, Dad, give us the house for the sake of your grandson." I charged at him, "Enough of the emotional manipulation. Don't dare to blackmail me any further. Until now, you extorted my money in my house, saying, 'Dad, please do this for the sake of your son.' Now when that card is not working, you are using your son to get away with your demands. Just get out of here. You are not getting anything." The next day he showed up with his wife and son. I said, "I'm not taking any apology. It's not just about birthday invitations. The hatred is deep-rooted. She hates me for my job. She considers it menial. There's no way I can let anyone mock my profession. Mechanic jobs may be dirty, and our hands may be dirty with oil and grease, but dude, it involves skills. What do you have? You are jobless just because you're beautiful, and your dad as a lawyer doesn't give you a right to humiliate others." She fell on her knees and said sorry, but I slammed the door in their face. I don't want to have any contact with that toxic woman and that spineless man. I know it's not the end of the world for them to be kicked out of my house. Eventually, they'll be able to put their lives together. I also know for a fact that they would never forgive me. In fact, they are going to make my grandson bitter about me, but that's okay. I have given enough of myself to become likable by my DIL. I've realized the way that even if you give your life, there are some people who are never going to like you back. Now I'm okay with that. Okay being called a grumpy, selfish old man who threw his son, Dale, and 1-year-old grandson out of the house to live on the streets. The only remorse I have is for my grandson. That little creature has no idea what kind of parents he has got. He's living an uncomfortable life because of his stupid parents, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My husband cheated on me with my best friend for months, and she confessed everything, even showing me their texts, and I'm completely devastated. My husband, 39, and I, 37, have been married for 7 years. We have a 5-year-old son. He also has a 9-year-old son from his previous marriage. My best friend, 36, confessed to me that she and my husband had an affair last year that ended around Christmas time by 2023. I had noticed some distance there on her part, but she always seemed to have what sounded like valid reasons. I definitely felt like something was different with her, but I never assumed it was anything like this. We still talked and saw each other during the entire time that they were doing whatever they were doing together, and since it all ended in December, she told me now because she has confessed to her husband, and she wanted me to hear it from her instead of him. She's filing for a legal separation from her husband, and in their long talk about their marriage and why this was happening, she confessed to the affair she had with my husband. During those conversations, I guess I made the mistake of telling her about the romantic things my husband still does for me and about how good he is in bed. And that's the truth. I thought our relationship was great. I was, and frankly still am, in love with him. I never had any sense that he wasn't attracted to me, was interested in other people, or was cheating. She said it started in October 2023 and it was just sex. I know she had been very dissatisfied with her own marriage and sex life with her husband because she had talked to me about it several times. At one point, she was even considering divorcing her husband. She would always say she loved her husband, and he was a good man, but their relationship lacked any sense of romance and didn't satisfy her sexually. She said she found herself flirting with him at a children's Halloween party in October. She felt very attracted to him and admitted she was jealous of what I had but never thought of pursuing him. Then, after the party, she decided to text my husband to ask for advice about her husband and their marriage. We're all friends and we get along, and normally I'd never feel weird about her texting my husband for a man's perspective on anything. However, in this case, I believe it was just her excuse to start texting him and talking about how dissatisfied she was. She said the texts progressively got more and more inappropriate until they were sexting each other. She showed me parts of their text conversation, but I didn't want to look at it. Eventually, they met up in the middle of the weekday to have sex. She said they probably met up and had sex 20 or so times. She claims they talked about it and both felt an extreme sense of guilt, so they mutually ended it around Christmas. My husband is a really good-looking guy. He's a people person. His job sort of puts him in the public light here where we live. He's known in our community. He's out and about a lot. Because of that, it's not strange for women to flirt with him, and I'd say he is a flirty person, but somebody who definitely knew where to draw the line. Our sex life is great. We make time to do things together, just the two of us. We definitely laugh way more than we argue. I just never thought he'd ever do this to me, and with my supposed best friend of all people. This past weekend, he was on a trip with his older son. She says she told her husband and me this weekend because she knew my husband was away, and this might give me time to process. How considerate of her to think of me. Now I feel like all of my insides have been ripped out. I feel completely empty inside, hollow. I picked them up from the airport yesterday and didn't let on that I knew anything. He was in a good mood and acting completely normal. I told him I wasn't feeling good and immediately went straight to bed so that I wouldn't have to interact with him. I'm a bad liar. I'm trying to figure out what in the heck I'm going to do first before confronting him, but I'm not sure that's going to be possible. I'm also worried my friend's husband will contact my husband. I haven't heard from him yet. I should probably reach out to him, but I feel so nervous. I didn't do anything wrong, but I suppose I feel guilty by proxy. It's ridiculous. Later at night, when my husband went to bed, he was rubbing on me and tried to initiate sex. Normally, I would want sex after being apart for a few days, so it's just not realistic to think I'm going to be able to put on an act for very long. Comments. Comment 1. Talk to a lawyer and see where you stand. He is good at hiding and not letting his guilt show, so he might be an expert in this. Time to start looking and see what else he has hidden from you. Look at social media and phone. Good luck and stay strong. Comment 2. Extreme guilt would be stopping and confessing after the first time. 20 or so times is a full-blown affair. The fact that he has been acting totally normal all this time shows what a good liar he is. So from now on, believe nothing. This was not an accident or a mistake. Think of all the deliberate planning that has to take place in order to meet up 20 times and keep all that sex and all that communication hidden. Keep in mind that if your friend had not told you, your WH would still be going on with his charade. Just tell him you were getting STD tested and you are going to see a lawyer as soon as possible, and you would like him to find somewhere else to stay until the two of you can work out a co-parenting and custody plan. If he won't, then ask him to move out of your shared bedroom. Gray rock him and only communicate about the kids. Communication about property, etc., is what lawyers are for. Expect your husband to deny. Keep in mind you don't know if the friend was his only AP. He seems quite adept at hiding his affairs. She may be filing for separation due to her and your WH making plans to be together. Her divorce is a way to force things to come to a head. Comment 3. Get a lawyer, a therapist, and a divorce. Your best friend of all people. It's like a sister. If you stay with him, you will forever wonder if he's cheating and be miserable. Read, leave a cheater. Gain a life. The fact he can carry on without you even suspecting would seriously worry me. Makes me wonder how often he's lied. Opie. Either he's a really good liar or actor, or maybe I'm just that oblivious. I can't believe I noticed nothing. I noticed a difference with her the entire time. I was concerned about her and what might be going on. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.